When I saw my daughter on her knees scrubbing the driveway of the $4 million estate I bought for her, she looked at me with terror in her eyes and whispered, "Sir, please leave before the master sees you." She didn't even know I was her father. I gripped my cane until my knuckles turned white, swallowed my rage, and made a phone call that would burn their entire world to the ground. It is time for justice. I am so glad you are here. If you are watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you are listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has traveled. I stood before the towering iron gates of the estate in Buckhead, Atlanta. The late afternoon sun beat down on my neck, but I felt cold inside. My clothes were tattered, stained with the red dust of a decade spent in a foreign hell, and my beard was gray and matted. To anyone passing by, I looked like a beggar, a broken old man seeking a handout. But I felt like a king returning to a castle that had been stolen. This was the house I had purchased with cash 10 years ago, a gift for my only child to start her new life. $4 million of architectural perfection with sprawling lawns and white columns that gleamed in the southern heat. I pressed the intercom button with a trembling finger. There was no answer. I pressed again, harder this time. Finally, the heavy gates groaned and began to swing open. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I expected to see my daughter Nia perhaps running down the driveway, older, beautiful, radiant in the life I had provided for her. I expected tears of joy, a scream of disbelief, a hug that would put my broken pieces back together. Instead, a figure emerged from the side service door. She walked with her head down her shoulders, slumped in defeat, wearing a gray uniform that was 2 sizes too big and stained with bleach. She carried a heavy mop and a galvanized bucket. I squinted against the sun, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The woman looked frail, her skin ashy and dry, her beautiful hair hidden under a cheap, rough scarf. She stopped 10 feet from the gate, refusing to make eye contact. I gripped the iron bars of the fence to keep from falling. "Nia," I rasped. My voice was rusty from disuse, cracking under the weight of emotion. "Is that you, baby girl?" The woman flinched as if I had thrown a stone at her. She looked up slowly, and I felt my soul crack down the middle. It was her. It was my Nia. But the light was gone from her eyes. A jagged pink scar ran across her forehead, a mark of violence that had not been there when I left. She looked at me not with love or recognition or even curiosity, but with absolute terror. She stepped back, raising the mop handle defensively, as if to shield herself from a blow. "Please go away," she whispered, her voice trembling and hoarse. "We do not have any money for you. The master does not like vagrants. Go before he sees you." I couldn't breathe. The master. My daughter, a woman who had graduated with honors, who had a spirit like wildfire, was speaking like a frightened servant in her own home. "Nia, look at me," I pleaded, reaching a hand through the bars, my fingers desperate to touch her. "It is Daddy. I am home. I did not die. Look at me." She shook her head violently, her eyes darting toward the main house windows in panic. "My father is dead," she recited, her voice flat and monotone like a robot programmed to speak. "He died in the crash 10 years ago. Everyone knows that. You are just a confused old man. Please leave. If Bennett sees you talking to me, I will lose my dinner privileges again." Dinner privileges. The words hung in the humid air like a toxic fog. My daughter, the heiress to a real estate empire, was worried about earning the right to eat in the house I paid for. Before I could scream, before I could tear the gate off its hinges, the aggressive roar of an engine cut through the silence. A silver Porsche 911 GT3 cornered the street at breakneck speed. It did not slow down as it approached the driveway. It aimed straight for the gate where Nia stood. She screamed a sound of pure, instinctual fear and threw herself into the sharp hedges to avoid being hit. The car skidded to a halt inches from the iron bars, dust coating my worn boots. The driver door flew open and Bennett Sterling stepped out. He looked exactly as I remembered him, only richer, sleeker, and crueler. He wore a linen suit that cost more than most people make in a year, and a gold watch glinted on his wrist. He marched over to the bushes where my daughter was cowering, trying to pull herself out of the thorns. "Get up, you useless animal," he roared. I watched, paralyzed by a mixture of shock and strategy, as he grabbed Nia by the arm and hauled her to her feet with unnecessary force. She whimpered, dropping the bucket. Dirty water splashed onto Bennett's Italian loafers. The air went silent. Bennett looked at his wet shoes, his face turning a deep shade of crimson. Then he looked at Nia. Without a word, without a second of hesitation, he backhanded her across the face. The sound was sickeningly loud, like a pistol shot. Nia fell to the gravel, curling into a ball, protecting her head with her thin arms. "I told you not to open the gate for trash." Bennett spat at her, looming over her shaking form. "Look what you made me do. Now my shoes are ruined. You will lick them clean later." I felt a heat rise in my chest that I had not felt since the days I fought for my life in the desert after the crash. My hands shook not from age, but from the colossal effort it took not to rush him. I wanted to crush his windpipe. I wanted to make him pay in blood. But I stopped myself. I looked at my reflection in the side mirror of his car. I was a 71-year-old man, leaning on a cane, looking frail, dirty, and broken. If I attacked him now, I would just be a crazy old homeless man assaulting a pillar of the community. The police would come. I would be arrested, or worse, institutionalized, and Nia would be left alone in this hell with no one to save her. I needed to be smart. I needed to get inside. I needed to know everything before I struck. Bennett turned his cold blue eyes toward me, wiping his hand on a silk handkerchief. "What are you looking at, old man?" he sneered, walking toward the gate. "You want a handout, get a job, or get lost before I call the cops?" I lowered my head, hiding the fire in my eyes. I hunched my shoulders, exaggerating my limp, making myself look smaller, weaker, harmless. "I do not want charity, sir," I said, making my voice quaver and pitch high. "The agency sent me. They said you fired your gardener and needed help. I work cheap. I have nowhere else to go." Bennett laughed, a cruel barking sound that grated on my ears. He looked me up and down, taking in my rags, my cane, my gray beard. "A gardener. You look like you belong in a grave. You think you can handle this estate?" He gestured grandly to the sprawling grounds, but then his eyes narrowed. He looked at the lawn, which I noticed was overgrown and neglected in the corners. He was cheap. I remembered that about him from when he was dating Nia. He loved luxury, but he hated paying for labor. He wanted slaves, not employees. How cheap, he asked, his greed piquing his interest. $10 a day and a place to sleep in the shed, I mumbled, staring at his shoes. "I just need a roof, sir. I am good with roses. I know this soil." Bennett grinned. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. $10, huh? That is less than I spend on coffee." He kicked the gate open wider. "Get in here, then. But listen to me, old man. If I catch you stealing even a single silver spoon, I will have the dogs chase you down. And you work until I say you are done." He pointed a manicured finger at Nia, who was wiping blood from her split lip and trying to stand up. "And stay away from the maid. She is crazy. Damaged goods. Just like you. Do not speak to her. Do not look at her. She forgets who she is sometimes." I hobbled through the gates, clutching my canvas bag tight to my chest. I walked past my daughter, who flinched as I passed her shadow. I wanted to grab her, to hold her, to tell her that her father had walked through fire to get back to her. But I kept my eyes on the ground. "Go clean the backyard," Bennett ordered, checking his watch. "It is full of dog filth. Use your hands if you have to. I have guests coming tonight, and I want it spotless." I nodded, swallowing my pride. "Yes, sir." I walked toward the back of the house where I had once hosted galas, the house where I had planned to retire. "My name is Langston Thorne. I am 71 years old. I was once the most powerful real estate developer in Atlanta. For 10 years, the world thought I was dead, but as I plunged my hands into the dirt of my own garden, preparing to serve the man who had enslaved my daughter, I made a silent vow. I am not dead, and I am not a gardener. I am the storm that is coming for Bennett Sterling, and when I am finished, he will wish he had died in that crash instead of me." I walked into the backyard of the estate I had designed with my own hands 15 years ago. It used to be a paradise of blooming hydrangeas and perfectly manicured hedges. Now it looked like a prison yard. Weeds choked the roses I had planted for Nia's 16th birthday. The marble fountain was dry and filled with dead leaves. But the true horror was not the garden. It was what was happening on the patio. A young woman sat on a white wicker chair, sipping an iced latte with an air of entitlement that made my stomach turn. This was Chloe. I recognized her instantly from the photos and the dossiers my lawyer had sent me before I arrived. She was Bennett's mistress, living openly in my daughter's house, wearing my daughter's clothes and ruling over my daughter's life. Nia was on her knees in front of her. My child, who had once debated professors at Yale, was using a rag to scrub mud off Chloe's high-heeled boots while Chloe was still wearing them. "You missed a spot, you idiot," Chloe sneered, kicking her foot out. The boot struck Nia in the chest. Nia didn't even flinch. She just bowed her head lower and scrubbed harder, her hands red and raw. I gripped the handle of my rake, my knuckles turning white. The urge to rush forward and strike was overwhelming, but I forced my feet to stay planted. I was an old gardener. I was invisible. If I acted now, I would lose everything. "Hurry up," Chloe barked, checking her phone. "Bennett and I have the gala tonight. If these boots aren't spotless, you will be sleeping outside with the dogs again." Nia murmured something. I couldn't hear, a sound of total submission that broke my heart more than any scream could have. This wasn't just abuse. It was erasure. They were erasing the woman I raised and replacing her with a slave. I turned away, forcing myself to start raking the dead leaves near the pool house. The rhythmic scraping sound was the only thing keeping me grounded. As I worked, the memories flooded back, unbidden and painful. I remembered standing on this exact spot 10 years ago. The grass had been green and lush then. I had handed Bennett a set of keys, the heavy brass keys to this kingdom. He was just a boy then, or so I thought. He had looked at me with wide, grateful eyes. "Mr. Thorne," he had said, shaking my hand with a firm grip, "I will protect her with my life. I promise." I had believed him. I had been so arrogant, so sure of my own judgment. I thought I could see the soul of a man. I was a fool. I didn't see a protector. I saw a reflection of my own vanity. I wanted Nia to have everything I never had growing up. I wanted her to have a palace. So I bought it for her, cash down $4 million. I didn't sign a prenuptial agreement. I didn't put the deed in a trust. I just gave it to them. I effectively handed a wolf the keys to the sheep pen and walked away, patting myself on the back for being a good father. That mistake cost me 10 years. It cost Nia her sanity. And now I was raking the leaves of my own failure, watching the wolf's mistress treat my daughter like livestock. The back door opened and Chloe went inside, laughing into her phone. Nia stayed on her knees for a moment longer, staring at the ground before slowly picking up her bucket and heading toward the kitchen entrance. I waited until the door clicked shut, then dropped my rake and followed her. I had to speak to her. I had to know if there was anything left of my daughter inside that shell. The kitchen was a mess of dirty dishes and expensive catering trays. Nia was standing by the sink, eating leftovers from a plate that looked like it had been intended for the trash. Cold pasta and half-eaten bread. She ate quickly, furtively, like a starving animal afraid of being caught. I stepped into the room, my boots heavy on the tile floor. She jumped, dropping a piece of bread. Her eyes went wide with panic. "Please," she whispered, backing into the corner. "I was just cleaning up. I wasn't stealing. I promise." "Nia," I said softly, raising my hands to show I meant no harm. "It is me. Look at my face. Do you remember the song I used to sing to you summertime? And the living is easy." I hummed the melody, the deep baritone notes that used to put her to sleep when she was a baby. I watched her face, searching for a spark, a flicker of recognition. For a second, her brow furrowed. She tilted her head, and a look of confusion crossed her face. But then it was gone, replaced by a wall of dull terror. "My father is dead," she recited again, her voice flat. "He left me. He went on a plane and never came back. He didn't love me enough to stay. Bennett saved me. Bennett is the only one who cares." The words were like daggers. Bennett saved me. It was a script, a lie repeated so many times it had become her truth. They had brainwashed her. They had taken my absence, my accident, my coma in a foreign hospital, and twisted it into abandonment. "You are confused, old man," she said, turning back to the sink. "You should go. If Bennett finds you here, he will hurt us both." My eyes scanned the counter as she turned the water on. There was a row of amber prescription bottles lined up near the coffee maker. I moved closer, feigning interest in the coffee pot. One bottle had the label turned toward me. It read Vitamin B Complex, but the seal was broken and the smell emanating from it was not vitamins. I knew that smell. It was acrid, chemical, and heavy. It smelled like the strong sedatives they used in the hospital after my crash. I reached out and shook the bottle. The pills inside rattled heavily. They were drugging her. They were feeding her powerful antipsychotics disguised as vitamins to keep her docile, to keep her confused, to keep her memory fragmented. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through my veins. This wasn't just greed. This was systematic torture. "What are you doing?" the voice boomed from the doorway. I spun around. Bennett was standing there still in his expensive suit, his face twisted in a snarl. He held a golf club in his hand, tapping the head against his palm. "I told you to clean the yard, not raid my kitchen," he spat, stepping into the room. He looked at Nia, who was trembling so hard the dishes in the sink clattered. "And you. I told you no talking to the help." He lunged forward, swinging the golf club. It smashed into the counter inches from my hand, shattering a ceramic bowl. Shards of pottery flew everywhere. Nia screamed and dropped to the floor, covering her head. "Get out!" Bennett roared, pointing the club at my chest. "Get back to work. If I see you near her again, I will not just fire you. I will chop your hands off. Do you hear me, old man? I will cripple you." I looked at him. I looked at the fear in Nia's eyes. I looked at the bottle of pills on the counter. I lowered my head, hiding the promise of violence in my eyes. "Yes, sir," I mumbled, backing away. "I am sorry, sir. Just looking for water." I shuffled out the back door. My limp exaggerated my posture, stooped. But inside I was standing tall. I had seen enough. I knew their game now. They thought they had broken her. They thought I was just a helpless old man, but they were wrong. I walked to the tool shed, picked up my shovel, and drove it into the earth. Every scoop of dirt was a promise. I wasn't just cleaning the yard. I was digging their graves. That evening, the estate transformed into a theater of the grotesque. Luxury cars lined the driveway I had paved, and the air filled with the sound of a string quartet playing Mozart. I stood in the shadows of the grand ballroom wearing a stiff white server jacket that smelled of mothballs, holding a silver tray of champagne. My beard was trimmed just enough to look presentable, but my eyes remained lowered. To these people, I was furniture. I was a prop in their play of wealth and excess. Bennett stood in the center of the room holding a crystal tumbler of scotch like a scepter. He was surrounded by a circle of sycophants, men in tuxedos and women in diamonds that cost more than my daughter's freedom. I moved closer, silently weaving through the crowd to refill glasses, my ears straining to hear his voice. "It is a tragedy, really," Bennett was saying, his voice dripping with faux solemnity. "We tried everything to find him. Poor Langston. He insisted on that solo trip to the Congo, wanted to reconnect with his roots," he said. "We never even found the body. Just some wreckage in the jungle. I declared him dead 2 years ago. It was the only way to move forward and secure the estate." A woman with a pearl necklace gasped, touching Bennett's arm. "You are a saint for taking on all this responsibility, Bennett. And what about his daughter? I heard she took it hard." Bennett sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation that made my blood boil. Took it hard is an understatement. Naya had a complete psychotic break. Schizophrenia, the doctors say, triggered by the abandonment. She thinks he is still alive sometimes. It is heartbreaking. I keep her here at the house because if I sent her to a facility, she would just rot away. I give her small tasks to keep her grounded. It is a burden, of course, but she is family. I am basically running a charity ward here. The group murmured their approval, raising their glasses to his generosity. I gripped the silver tray so hard the metal bit into my palms. He had turned my death into a cocktail party anecdote. He had turned my daughter's enslavement into an act of mercy. He was erasing our history and rewriting himself as the hero. I watched him laugh, his head thrown back, his teeth white and predatory. He looked like a king, but he did not know the king was standing right behind him, holding a tray of cheap champagne. I needed to disrupt this. I needed to test the limits of his control and see just how far he would go in front of an audience. Chloe was standing near the chocolate fountain, laughing at something Bennett had said. She was wearing a white silk gown that clung to her like a second skin. It was pristine. It was expensive, and it was the perfect target. I moved with the slow, shuffled gait of the elderly gardener I was pretending to be. I waited for the perfect moment when the laughter was loudest, when eyes were diverted. As I passed behind Chloe, I allowed my foot to catch on the edge of the rug. It was a calculated stumble. I pitched forward just enough. The tray tilted. 3 flutes of red wine slid off the silver surface. They hit Chloe's shoulder and shattered, cascading a river of dark crimson liquid down the front of her white dress. The silence that followed was instant and absolute. The music seemed to stop. Chloe looked down at her ruined gown, her mouth opening in a silent scream before the sound finally ripped from her throat. "You stupid old fool," she shrieked, shoving me backward. "Look what you did. This is vintage Valentino." I cowered, exaggerating my trembling, dropping the tray with a loud clang. "I am sorry, Ma, I stammered, my voice high and thin. I tripped. My legs are not what they used to be. Bennett was on me in a second. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. The charming host vanished, replaced by the abuser. He grabbed me by the collar of my jacket, hauling me up onto my toes. "You clumsy piece of filth," he hissed, his spit hitting my face. "I should kill you right here." He raised his hand, his fist clenched, ready to strike me down in front of 50 witnesses. I tensed my muscles, ready to take the blow, ready to let the guests see the monster beneath the suit. But the blow never landed. A blur of gray motion threw itself between us. It was Naya. She had been collecting empty glasses in the corner, but seeing me in danger, she had sprinted across the room. She threw her thin body in front of mine, shielding me with her own fragile frame. "No," she screamed, her voice raw and terrified. "Do not hit him, Bennett. He is old. He did not mean it. Please. Hit me instead. It was my fault. I distracted him. Please, master, do not hurt him." The room gasped. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Nia was trembling violently, her hands raised to protect her face, a reflex born of 1,000 beatings. She did not know I was her father. She only knew that she had to protect the weak because no one had ever protected her. Bennett froze. He looked around the room, realizing his mask had slipped. He saw the shock in the eyes of his guests. He needed to regain control. He needed to change the narrative. He lowered his hand, slowly smoothing his jacket. He let out a cold, dry laugh. "You see," he said, addressing the crowd while pointing at Nia. "This is the illness I was talking about. The hysteria. The delusions. She thinks everyone is attacking everyone." He grabbed Nia by the hair, not hard enough to look like an assault to the untrained eye, but hard enough to control her. He pulled her upright. "Come on, Nia," he said, his voice tight with suppressed violence. "You need your medication. You are having an episode. Chloe, go get changed. I will handle the staff." He began to drag Nia toward the service door. She did not fight him. She just looked back at me, her eyes filled with tears, and whispered, "Run." I watched them leave the ballroom. The guests awkwardly returned to their conversations, desperate to ignore the ugliness they had just witnessed. But I did not stay. As soon as the heavy oak doors swung shut behind Bennett and Nia, I slipped out the side exit. I moved through the shadows of the garden, circling the house until I reached the small ventilation grate near the storage room. It was a windowless concrete box where they kept cleaning supplies. I knew it well. I had designed it as a storm shelter. Now it was a torture chamber. I pressed my ear against the cold brick wall. At first there was silence. Then I heard the heavy thud of a body being thrown against shelves. "You embarrassed me." Bennett's voice was muffled but clear. "I give you a roof over your head. I feed you and you make a scene in front of the senator." "I am sorry," Nia sobbed. "I just didn't want you to hurt the old man." "You care about the old man," Bennett sneered. "Good. Then you take his punishment." Then came the sound. It was a sound that will haunt me until my dying day. The sharp whistle of a leather belt cutting through the air, followed by the sickening, wet crack of impact against flesh. 1. Naya did not scream. That was the worst part. She whimpered a low, guttural sound of endurance. She was used to this. 2. I fumbled in my pocket for the burner phone I had bought at the airport. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from a murderous rage that threatened to black out my vision. I pressed the record button and held the phone up to the grate, capturing every thud, every whimper, every curse Bennett spat at my child. 3. I have to be quiet, Bennett hissed. The guests might hear. Bite down on this. I heard a shuffling sound, then a muffled choking noise. He was gagging her. 4, 5, 6. I counted every strike. I felt them on my own skin. I wanted to break down the door. I wanted to tear him apart with my bare hands. But I knew if I did that now, the police would come and Bennett would spin a story about a home invasion. He had the money. He had the influence. I was just a ghost. I needed more than violence. I needed total annihilation. I pulled the phone away from the grate after the 10th blow. The silence that followed was heavy and broken only by Nia's jagged breathing. I walked away from the house, my steps heavy, my heart turning to stone. I went to the edge of the property where the old oak tree stood, the only living thing that remembered who I really was. I dialed a number I had memorized 10 years ago. It rang once, twice. Langston, a voice answered. It was Alistair Wright, my lawyer, my oldest friend. His voice was thick with sleep and disbelief. "Is that really you?" "It is me, Alistair. I said, my voice devoid of any emotion except cold, hard resolve. I am alive, and I need you to wake up, Langston. My God, we thought you were the accounts, the business, everything is. Stop, I interrupted him. Listen to me very carefully, Alistair. I am activating the Phoenix Protocol. There was a pause on the other end. The Phoenix Protocol was a contingency plan we had designed decades ago, a scorched earth legal strategy reserved for the absolute worst-case scenario. It meant total liquid asset mobilization, aggressive hostile takeovers, and the destruction of enemies by any means necessary. The Phoenix Protocol. Alistair repeated, his voice dropping to a whisper. Langston, what is happening? They have my daughter Alistair, I said, looking back at the house that glowed like a beacon of evil in the night. They enslaved her. They tortured her. Bennett Sterling is a dead man walking. He just does not know it yet. I want everything, Alistair. I want Bennett's financial history going back to the day he was born. I want his debts, his secrets, his mistresses. I want to know who holds the mortgage on this house. Bennett holds the title, Alistair said. He forged the transfer documents years ago. Good, I said. Then I want you to buy the bank that holds his loans. I want you to buy the security firm that guards this estate. I want you to buy the very air he breathes. I want to own the ground he stands on before the sun comes up. Consider it done, Alistair said, the steel returning to his voice. And Langston, welcome home. I hung up the phone. I looked at my hands. They were dirty, calloused, and shaking. But they were no longer the hands of a gardener. They were the hands of Langston Thorne. And tomorrow morning Bennett Sterling would find out that he had been beating the daughter of a man who could buy his life with pocket change. The roar of Bennett's Porsche fading down the driveway was the sound of opportunity I had been waiting for. It was Saturday morning. Bennett had a tea time at the country club and Chloe had an appointment at a medical spa to inject more poison into her face. The estate was silent for the first time in 24 hours. I did not waste a second. I dropped my rake near the back porch and slipped through the kitchen door using the spare key I had hidden under a loose stone in the patio wall 15 years ago. Bennett was arrogant, but he was also lazy. He had never changed the locks because he believed he owned the world and no one would dare touch what was his. I moved through the house like a phantom. The air inside was stale and smelled of stale cigar smoke and Chloe's cloying perfume. It was a desecration of the home I had built. I went straight to my old study on the ground floor. This was the nerve center of my empire before the crash. The heavy mahogany desk was still there, but it was covered in ring stains from Scotch glasses and piles of unpaid bills. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled the copy of Moby Dick that concealed the wall safe. My hands trembled slightly as I punched in the combination. Right 30, left 10, right 4. It was Nia's birthday. The mechanism clicked. The heavy steel door swung open. My heart sank. It was empty. The deeds to my properties, the original stock certificates, the emergency cash reserves, and most importantly, the trust fund documents for Nia were gone. The safe had been gutted. Bennett had not just taken over, he had erased me. I ran my hand inside the cold metal box, feeling for anything he might have missed. My fingers brushed against a single piece of paper stuck to the back wall. I pulled it out. It was a pawn shop receipt dated 2 years ago. Item description, vintage diamond necklace. Value $5,000. That necklace was my wife's. It was worth $50,000. She saw it. He had sold my late wife's legacy for quick cash to fund his gambling habits. I crushed the receipt in my fist. He was not just a thief. He was a scavenger, picking the meat off the bones of my family. I turned to leave the study, my mind racing with plans to hunt down every single item he had stolen when a floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around. Nia was standing in the doorway. She was trembling so violently that her teeth chattered. In her right hand, she gripped a long, serrated fruit knife. Her knuckles were white around the handle. Her eyes were wide and glassy, dilated from the drugs they were forcing down her throat, but filled with a terrifying, frantic energy. "You are a thief," she whispered, her voice hitching. "You broke in. I saw you. You are stealing from the master." "Nia, put the knife down," I said, keeping my voice low and calm. "I am not stealing. This is my house." "Liar!" she screamed, lunging forward. The knife slashed through the air inches from my chest. "Get out! Get out before I call him. He will kill me if he finds out I let a thief in. He will put me in the box again." She slashed again, more desperate this time. She was not attacking me out of malice. She was attacking me out of survival instinct. She was terrified that if Bennett found a stranger in the house, she would be the one to pay the price. "Nia, listen to me," I said, stepping back until my legs hit the desk. "I am not a stranger. I am your father. I am Langston." "No," she wailed, raising the knife for a third strike. "My father is dead. He died in the jungle. He left me. You are just a dirty old man." She lunged. I caught her wrist mid-air. She was weak, frail from malnutrition, but adrenaline gave her strength. We struggled. The knife tip hovered inches from my throat. I could see the terror in her eyes, the absolute belief that she was fighting for her life. I had to break through the programming. I had to shock her back to reality. I used my free hand to rip open the collar of my work shirt. I exposed my left shoulder. There, carved into the dark skin, was a jagged white scar shaped like a lightning bolt. It was a souvenir from a construction accident when I was 20, but to Nia, it had always been a story. "Look at it, Nia!" I roared, pushing my shoulder toward her face. "Look at the lightning. Who told you the story of the lightning man? Who let you color this scar with your purple crayons when you were 5 years old? Look at it." Nia froze. Her breath hitched in her throat. Her eyes dropped to my shoulder. She stared at the scar. The knife trembled in her hand. The memories were fighting through the fog of sedatives and trauma. I saw the moment the wall cracked. Her pupils contracted. Her mouth opened. "Daddy," she whispered the word, barely a breath. "Yes, baby girl. It is me. Purple crayon," she murmured. I used the purple one because it was magic. The knife clattered to the floor. Her legs gave out. I caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her into my arms. She buried her face in my dirty shirt and howled. It was a sound of pure agony, a release of 10 years of torture. I held her tight, rocking her back and forth as my own tears soaked her hair. I had her back. But as I held her frail body, I realized she weighed nothing. She was nothing but bones and grief. "Daddy," she sobbed, clutching me. "I thought you left me. He told me you ran away. He told me you hated me. I never left you, I vowed. I was lost, but I fought my way back, and I am never leaving you again." Suddenly she pulled away, her eyes wide with panic again. "You have to hide. If he finds you, he will kill us. He has a gun. He keeps it in the car. You have to go." "I am not going anywhere without you," I said. "Where is your room? Where do you sleep?" She looked down at the floor, ashamed. "I do not have a room anymore." He moved me. "Show me." She led me out of the study and toward the kitchen, but we did not stop there. She opened the narrow door to the pantry and pulled a hidden latch I had installed years ago for maintenance access to the furnace. A set of wooden stairs led down into the darkness. "Down there," she whispered. I followed her down into the bowels of my own home. The air grew cold and damp. The smell hit me first. It was the stench of mildew, unwashed clothes, and human misery. At the bottom of the stairs was the basement utility room. It had no windows. The only light came from a single bare bulb hanging from a wire. I looked around and I wanted to burn the world down. There was no bed, just a thin, stained mattress on the concrete floor. A bucket sat in the corner. A dog bowl filled with dry cereal was next to the mattress. This was where my daughter, the Princess of Atlanta, had been living. Nia sat on the mattress, hugging her knees. "This is my place," she said. "It is safe here. Sometimes he forgets to come down." I knelt beside her. My hand brushed against something hard under the edge of the mattress. I pulled it out. It was a small leather-bound notebook. "That is mine," she said, snatching at it. "Do not read it. It is my secrets. Nia, I need to know what they did to you. I need to know everything so I can destroy them." She hesitated, then slowly handed it back. I opened it. The pages were filled with frantic, scribbled handwriting. It was a log of horrors. August 12th. Bennett killed Buster today. He said the dog was eating too much. He made me bury him in the garden. I miss Daddy. September 4th. Chloe burned me with her curling iron because I shrank her sweater. It hurts to sleep. I flipped to the last page, written only yesterday. The handwriting was jagged, terrified. They are talking about Friday. I heard Bennett on the phone. He is selling the house to a developer. He says he cannot have a crazy woman ruining the deal. He's going to take me to the asylum on Friday morning. He says they will give me a lobotomy, so I stop asking for my father. If anyone reads this, I am already dead. I closed the book. My hands were shaking with a cold, lethal rage. Friday. Today was Wednesday. They were planning to dispose of her in 48 hours. They were going to sell my house, erase my daughter's mind, and walk away with millions. I looked at Nia. She was watching me, trusting me for the first time in a decade. Friday, I said, standing up. Friday is the day they die. I put the diary in my pocket. Nia, you have to be brave for 2 more days. Can you do that? Can you pretend I was never here? I can, she whispered. But come back. Please come back. I kissed her forehead. I will come back with a storm, Nia. And when I do, Bennett Sterling will wish he was in that hole he dug for the dog. I climbed the stairs, leaving my heart in that dungeon. I had the evidence. I had the motivation. Now I needed the weapon. I took out my phone and dialed Alistair. Alistair, I said as soon as he answered. I found the basement, Langston. Your voice sounds like death, Alistair said. It is, I replied. I need you to meet me at the old diner on 4th Street. Bring the files, bring the cash, and Alistair, bring the deed to the house. I am going to buy my own property back, and I am going to pay for it with Bennett's blood. I slipped out the back gate and walked 2 miles to the waffle shack on the edge of town. It was the kind of place where the coffee tasted like battery acid and nobody asked questions. Alistair was already there, sitting in the back booth. He looked out of place in his 3-piece Armani suit surrounded by truck drivers. When he saw me, he stood up, his eyes filled with tears. He went to hug me but stopped when he saw the dirt and the smell hit him. I did not care. I grabbed him and held him tight. It was the first human touch I had felt in 10 years that was not violent. Sit down, Alistair, I said. We do not have time for sentiment. Show me the file. Alistair wiped his eyes and opened his leather briefcase. He slid a thick dossier across the sticky table. It is worse than we thought, Langston, he whispered. Bennett is not just a thief. He is a drowning man. I flipped through the pages. My eyes widened. Bennett owed $2 million to the Black Hammer Syndicate. They are the most vicious loan sharks in Atlanta. He borrowed against the house using a forged power of attorney. And the money, where did it go? Alistair pointed to a spreadsheet. Crypto scams, online gambling, and her. He slid a photo of Chloe across the table. He spent $300,000 on her in the last 6 months alone. Plastic surgery, designer clothes, a leased condo downtown. He is bleeding your estate dry to keep his mistress happy while your daughter starves in the basement. I felt the cold rage settle in my gut. He was selling the house on Friday not to move on but to pay off a death warrant. If he did not have the cash by the weekend, the sharks would kill him. That is why he is desperate. That is why he needs Nia gone. Alistair reached for his phone. I will call the FBI right now. We have enough for fraud, embezzlement, and elder abuse. No, I said, slamming my hand down on the file. No police, not yet. Alistair looked at me like I was crazy. Langston, he is torturing her. If we arrest him now, he gets a lawyer, I said. He gets bail. He spins a story about a mentally ill wife. He drags Nia through a trial she is too broken to handle, and the loan sharks might come for her if they think she has the money. No, I want him destroyed completely. I want him to lose everything believing he has won. What is the plan? Alistair asked. I pointed to the foreclosure notice in the file. He is selling the house to a private equity firm on Friday, right? Yes, Alistair nodded. The Orion Group. They are vultures. They buy distressed properties for cash. Buy the Orion Group, I commanded. Alistair blinked. Excuse me, you heard me. Buy the whole damn company, or at least set up a shell corporation that looks exactly like them. I want to be the buyer, Alistair. I want Bennett to sign that house over to me thinking he is getting a payout. I want his signature on a document that sells his life away. Can you do it in 24 hours? Alistair smiled, a sharp shark-like grin I had missed. For you, Langston, I can move mountains. I will set up the shell company by morning. We will offer him double his asking price. He will be so blinded by greed he will not read the fine print. I walked back to the estate, feeling the weight of the coming war in my bones. I had a plan. I had the power. But I had underestimated Bennett's paranoia. As soon as I stepped through the service gate, I saw the flashing blue lights. 3 police cruisers were parked in the driveway next to Bennett's Porsche. Bennett was standing on the front steps, holding a glass of scotch, looking triumphant. There he is, he shouted, pointing at me. That is the thief. Officer, arrest him. 2 deputies rushed me before I could even drop my bag. They slammed me against the hood of the cruiser, twisting my arms behind my back. I did not fight. I knew the drill. What is this about? I asked, spitting dust out of my mouth. We found it in his bunk, Bennett said, walking down the steps. He held up a gold Rolex watch. My Rolex. Worth $50,000. I knew this old vagrant was trouble the moment I hired him. I found it wrapped in his dirty rags in the garden shed. It was a lie. A clumsy, obvious frame job. He had planted it there while I was meeting Alistair. He wanted me gone. I had seen too much in the kitchen. I had spoken to Nia. He was cleaning house before the sale on Friday. Search him, the officer barked. They patted me down. They found the diary. Nia's diary. The officer pulled it out and handed it to Bennett. "What is this?" Bennett asked, flipping it open. His face went pale as he read the first page. Then a slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "Oh, I see. He has been stealing my poor wife's journals too. A sick old pervert obsessed with a mentally ill woman. Take him away, officers. Get this filth off my property." I looked up at the second-floor window. Nia was there. Her hands were pressed against the glass. She was screaming, but the sound was trapped behind the double-pane windows. She looked terrified. She thought I was leaving her. She thought I had failed. I locked eyes with Bennett. He expected me to beg. He expected me to cry and plead for mercy like a frightened old man. Instead, I stopped struggling. I straightened my spine as much as the handcuffs allowed. I stared into his soul with the cold, dead eyes of a man who had survived a plane crash and 10 years in hell. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator looking at prey. Bennett's smirk faltered. He took a step back, unsettled by the intensity of the gardener's gaze. "Enjoy the watch, Bennett," I said, my voice low and steady. "Time is running out." The officer shoved me into the back of the car. As we drove away, I did not look back at the house. I looked forward. Going to jail was not a setback. It was part of the education. I needed a haircut and a shave anyway. And when I walked out of that cell, I would not be the gardener anymore. I would be the executioner. The steel door slammed shut with a sound like a gunshot echoing through the concrete belly of the Fulton County Jail. The air inside the holding cell was thick and stagnant, smelling of unwashed bodies, industrial disinfectant, and stale urine. I looked around. There were 12 men in a cage built for 6. Most were sleeping on the metal benches or pacing the small floor, but in the corner a group of 3 sat playing cards. They stopped as I entered. They looked at my gray beard, my dirt-stained work clothes, and my cane. To them, I was just fresh meat, a week-old stray dog thrown into the wolf pit. I limped to the only empty spot on the bench and sat down, resting my hands on my cane. I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing. I had spent 10 years in a place where the mosquitoes carried malaria and the water could kill you in an hour. A county jail in Atlanta was a vacation. "Hey, Pops." The voice was deep and gravelly. I opened my eyes. The largest of the card players was standing over me. He was a mountain of a man, easily 6'4", with tattoos climbing up his neck like ivy. He pointed at my boots. "Those are nice work boots for a homeless guy. Size 12, right? Take them off. I need new shoes." I looked at him calmly. I looked at the scar running down his cheek and the crude prison ink on his knuckles. He was used to intimidation. He was used to fear. I did not feel fear anymore. I only felt patience. "I need my boots, son," I said, my voice low and raspy. "Go sit down." The cell went silent. The other prisoners sat up watching. The giant laughed a dry, humorless sound. He reached down and grabbed my collar, hauling me to my feet. I dropped my cane. It clattered loudly on the concrete floor. "You do not tell me what to do, old man," the giant hissed, his spit hitting my face. "I run this tank. Now give me the boots or I will break your legs and take them off your corpse." He pulled back a fist the size of a ham. He expected me to cower. He expected me to beg. Instead, I moved. I did not move like a 71-year-old man. I moved like a survivor who had fought off scavengers in the jungle with nothing but a sharpened stick. As he threw the punch, I stepped inside his guard. I did not try to block his strength. I used it. I grabbed his wrist with my left hand, and with my right hand I drove my thumb hard into the soft pressure point just beneath his jawline, right into the carotid sinus. It was a technique I learned from a mercenary in the Congo. It disrupts the blood flow to the brain instantly. The giant's eyes rolled back in his head. His knees buckled. I guided him down as he collapsed, dropping him onto the metal bench like a sack of wet cement. He gasped for air, clutching his neck, paralyzed by the sudden drop in blood pressure. I picked up my cane and tapped it gently against his shin. I said, "I need my boots," I whispered, leaning close to his ear. "Do not make me take yours." I sat back down. The giant groaned on the floor, trying to remember how to breathe. The other prisoners stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. Nobody said a word. Nobody moved. I closed my eyes again. I was not trapped in there with them. They were trapped in there with me. For the next 2 hours, the cell was the quietest place in Atlanta. I meditated on the image of Bennett Sterling's face when I had smiled at him from the police car. He thought he had won. He thought he had thrown out the trash. He had no idea he had just handed me the time I needed to sharpen my blade. The sound of the heavy lock disengaging broke the silence. A deputy opened the door. "Thorne," he barked. "You made bail. Let us go." I stood up. I walked past the giant who scrambled backward on the floor to get away from me. I walked out of the cell with my head high. In the processing area, Sheriff Miller was waiting. He was a portly man with a red face and eyes that shifted too much. He was on Bennett's payroll. I knew it because Alistair had found the wire transfers disguised as consulting fees. Miller was leaning against the counter smirking. "Look who it is," he said, chewing on a toothpick. "The gardener who likes to steal Rolexes. You have got friends in high places, old man. I do not know who posted your bail, but do not get comfortable. You are facing grand larceny. You are going to die in prison." Alistair Wright stepped out from the shadows of the waiting area. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that cost more than the sheriff made in 3 months. He held a leather briefcase, and his expression was as sharp as a razor. Sheriff Miller Alistair said, his voice smooth and dangerous. "My client is not going to prison, and he is not a gardener." Miller laughed. "He is a bum. Look at him. He smells like a landfill." Bennett Sterling told me all about him. A senile old drifter obsessed with his wife. I should have lost his paperwork and left him in the hole for a week. Alistair walked up to the counter. He did not raise his voice. He simply reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a single heavy card. It was gold-plated. He slid it across the counter. Sheriff Alistair said, "I suggest you look at the name on that card. And then I suggest you check the public records regarding the mortgage on your lake house, the one you bought last year with cash you cannot account for." Miller picked up the card. He read the name. Langston Thorne, founder and CEO, Thorne Global Holdings. He looked at me. He looked at the tattered man he had mocked. His face drained of color, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. "The bank that holds your mortgage," Alistair continued relentlessly, "was acquired by Thorne Holdings at 9 a.m. this morning, along with the debt on your wife's car and your son's tuition loans. Mr. Thorne is now your creditor sheriff, and he is not a forgiving man." I stepped forward, leaning on the counter until my face was inches from Miller's. I saw the sweat bead on his forehead. I saw the fear in his eyes. "I want my personal effects, Sheriff," I said softly, "and I want the recording of my booking erased. If I see your face near my property again, I will foreclose on your life. Do we understand each other?" Miller nodded frantically, his arrogance evaporating like mist. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." He scrambled to get the envelope with my wallet and the diary. He handed them to me with trembling hands. We walked out into the bright Atlanta sunshine. The air tasted sweet. Alistair opened the door of a black sedan that was waiting at the curb. "Where to, Langston?" Alistair asked as we settled into the leather seats. "Do we go to the police?" "No," I said, looking at my reflection in the window. The dirty, broken old man stared back at me. "Not yet. Bennett needs to believe he has won. He needs to sign that contract on Friday. But first the gardener has to die. Take me to Julian's." Julian's was the most exclusive barber and tailor in the city. It was a place where senators and titans of industry went to be groomed. We arrived 20 minutes later. Alistair had called ahead and bought out the entire shop for the afternoon. Julian, the owner, was waiting at the door. He was an old friend, one of the few who had never believed the rumors of my death. When he saw me, he did not flinch at the dirt or the smell. He just bowed his head. "Mr. Thorne," he said, "it is an honor." I sat in the heavy leather barber chair. The mirror showed me a ghost, a wild man. I looked at that man one last time, and then I nodded. "Cut it all off, Julian," I said. "Bring him back." The next 2 hours were a ritual of resurrection. The hot towels steamed away the prison grime. The straight razor scraped away the gray, matted beard, revealing the strong jawline that had intimidated boardrooms for decades. The scissors cut away the wild hair, leaving a sharp military cut that showed the gray at my temples. not as a sign of age, but as a mark of distinction. When the barber was done, I stood up and stripped off the gardener's rags. I threw them into the trash without a second glance. Alistair had brought the suit. It was a custom Italian three-piece navy blue wool tailored to fit my frame perfectly. I slid into the silk shirt, feeling the cool fabric against my scarred skin. I buttoned the vest. I tied the tie in a perfect Windsor knot. I looked in the full-length mirror. The beggar was gone. The victim was gone. Standing there was Langston Thorne, the Lion of Atlanta. I was older, yes. My face was lined with the map of my suffering. But my eyes were clear and cold. I looked powerful. I looked dangerous. Alistair stepped forward holding a velvet box. "You asked for this," he said. I opened the box. Inside sat my Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime. It was worth $2 million. I had left it in a safe deposit box before my trip to the Congo 10 years ago. I strapped it onto my wrist. The weight of the gold felt grounding. It was the final piece of armor. I checked the time. It was Thursday evening. Bennett was probably celebrating right now, drinking my scotch, thinking he had cleared the board for the sale tomorrow. He had no idea that the piece he had removed from the board had just promoted itself to a queen. I turned to Alistair. "Is the shell company ready?" "It is," Alistair replied, handing me a gold-headed cane to replace the wooden stick I had been using. "The offer is drafted. $8 million cash. Closing tomorrow at noon at the estate." "Good," I said, gripping the cane. "Bennett is greedy. He will see the number and lose his mind. He will sign anything." I walked to the door, my limp almost gone, replaced by a stride of purpose. "Let us go, Alistair," I said. "I want to buy my house back. And I want to look Bennett Sterling in the eye when I take his soul." Friday noon arrived with the suffocating heat of a Georgia summer, and the tension inside the Sterling estate was thick enough to choke on. The living room where I had once bounced my granddaughter on my knee had been converted into a war room. Bennett was pacing back and forth, checking his gold watch every 30 seconds. He had staged the room perfectly. The expensive scotch was out. The curtains were drawn to hide the neglected garden. He was ready to sell his soul, but first he needed to steal the deed. I was not in the room yet. I was outside waiting in the back of a tinted sedan a mile down the road, but I knew exactly what was happening. Alistair had tapped the security cameras inside the house hours ago. I watched the feed on a tablet, my heart hardening into a block of ice. Bennett dragged Nia out of the kitchen. She was wearing a clean but threadbare dress he must have dug out of storage. Her hair was brushed, but her eyes were vacant glassy from the heavy dose of sedatives he had forced down her throat at breakfast. "Sit down," Bennett growled, shoving her onto the leather sofa. He placed a thick stack of documents on the coffee table. These were the closing papers, the deed transfer, and right at the bottom was a quitclaim deed that required her signature. Since they were legally married and the house was technically a marital asset, he needed her to sign away her rights before he could sell to the Orion Group. "I do not want to sign," Nia whispered, her voice slurring. "I want my daddy. He said he was coming back." Bennett's face twisted. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a long, thin paring knife. He sat down next to her, sliding his arm around her waist like a loving husband. But on the screen I saw his hand move under the fold of her dress, pressing the blade against her ribs. "Your daddy is dead, you stupid cow," Bennett hissed into her ear. "He is rotting in a grave, and if you do not pick up that pen and sign your name on the dotted line, you are going to join him. Do you understand me?" Nia whimpered, trying to pull away, but he dug the point of the knife deeper. I saw a small spot of blood bloom on the fabric of her dress. "Sign it," Bennett ordered. "Or so help me God, I will carve my name into your skin." Nia picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She looked at the paper. She looked at Bennett. And then with tears streaming down her face, she scribbled her name. She was signing away her inheritance. She was signing away her safety. She was signing her own death warrant because we both knew that once that house was sold, Bennett would have no use for her. "Good girl," Bennett said, snatching the paper away. "Now go stand in the corner and keep your mouth shut. The buyers are here." I signaled the driver. It was time. The gravel of the driveway crunched under the tires of the Rolls-Royce Phantom. It was a beast of a car jet, black and imposing, a shark swimming through a sea of minnows. Alistair had pulled it from his private collection for this exact moment. We pulled up to the front steps right behind Bennett's leased Porsche. The contrast was brutal. The Porsche looked like a toy next to the Rolls-Royce. My driver, a massive former Special Forces operative named Marcus, stepped out and opened the rear door. I stepped out into the sunlight. The transformation was complete. The gardener was dead. In his place stood a man in a $10,000 bespoke Italian suit. My shoes were polished to a mirror shine. My beard was gone, replaced by a sharp jawline that had not seen the sun in a decade. I wore dark sunglasses that hid my eyes and gripped a cane topped with a golden dragon head. I did not look like a victim. I looked like money. Old, dangerous money. Bennett opened the front door expecting a team of corporate lawyers in gray suits. Instead, he saw me. He froze. He did not recognize me. How could he? He had only ever seen the dirty, broken old man raking his leaves. He had erased Langston Thorne from his memory years ago. He saw a tall, imposing black man radiating power, and for the first time that day, Bennett looked small. "Mr. Sterling, I presume," I said, my voice deep and smooth. Bennett blinked, recovering his composure. "Yes, I am Bennett Sterling. You must be the representative from the Orion Group. Please come in." I did not shake his hand. I walked past him into the foyer, my cane tapping a rhythmic warning on the marble floor. Click, click, click. I stopped in the center of the grand hallway and looked around with a sneer of distaste. "The air is stale," I said, removing my sunglasses slowly. "It smells of desperation." Bennett bristled, but his greed kept him in check. "We have had some issues with the ventilation," he stammered, closing the door. "But the structure is sound. $4 million is a steal for this location." I turned my cold gaze on him. "I am not here to steal, Mr. Sterling. I am here to acquire, and I do not pay $4 million for anything. I pay for value." I walked into the living room. Chloe was there now, sitting on the arm of the sofa, trying to look elegant but failing miserably. She looked at me, and I saw her eyes widen. She smelled the wealth on me like a bloodhound, but my eyes went straight to the corner. Nia was standing there, her hands clasped in front of her, looking at the floor. She looked broken, but as I entered, she lifted her head. Our eyes met. I saw the confusion clouding her face. She saw the suit. She saw the power. But then she looked at my left hand resting on the cane. She saw the way my ring finger twitched, a habit I had never been able to break. Her breath hitched. She took a tiny step forward. I hardened my gaze. "Not yet, baby girl. Not yet." I turned my back on her, facing Bennett. "This house has bad energy," I declared, waving my hand dismissively. "The feng shui is atrocious. It feels like a prison." Bennett laughed nervously. "We can remodel. The bones are good." "I am not interested in bones," I said. "I am interested in history. My investors are looking for a property with a soul. But this place, it feels like someone died here." Bennett paled. "Actually, my father-in-law built this place. He passed away tragically." "I know," I said. I did my due diligence. "Langston Thorne, a great man. It is a shame his legacy ended up in the hands of a man who sells his wife's jewelry to pay gambling debts." Bennett stopped breathing. The room went dead silent. "How do you know that?" he whispered. "I know everything, Mr. Sterling," I said, stepping closer to him until I was looming over him. "I know about the loan sharks. I know about the $2 million due by midnight. I know that if you do not walk out of here with a check today, you are a dead man." Bennett was trembling now, sweat beading on his forehead. "Who are you?" "I am the solution to your problems," I said. I pulled a checkbook from my inner pocket. I opened it and uncapped a gold fountain pen. "You are asking $4 million, I said, "but I am in a hurry, and I do not like negotiations. I will give you $8 million. Bennett's eyes almost popped out of his head. Chloe gasped, covering her mouth. $8 million. It was enough to pay his debts, buy a new life, and disappear. It was freedom. 8, he choked out. "You are serious." "Cash," I said. "Today, right now. But I have one condition." "Anything," Bennett said, his voice trembling with avarice. "The furniture, the art, take it all." "I do not want your furniture," I said with disgust. I pointed the head of my cane at the corner of the room. I pointed straight at Nia. "I want the help," I said. Bennett blinked, confused. "The maid." "Yes," I said. "I hear she has been here since the beginning. She knows the house. She knows the secrets. She knows where the bodies are buried, so to speak. My investors like continuity." I will buy the house for $8 million, but only if the servant comes with the deed. Bennett looked at Nia. He looked at me. He did not hesitate. He did not even blink. There was no conflict in his soul because he did not have one. He saw a woman he had vowed to love and cherish, and he saw $8 million. It was the easiest choice of his life. She is crazy, he said quickly, dismissively. She is damaged. She forgets things. That is fine, I said. I like damaged things. They are easier to fix. Do we have a deal, Mr. Sterling? The house and the girl for $8 million? Bennett grinned. It was a grotesque sight. Take her, he said. She is yours. Just write the check. I looked at Nia. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She had just watched her husband sell her like a piece of livestock. But she did not scream. She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw a flicker of hope. She knew. Somewhere deep inside the fog, she knew that the monster had just handed her over to the only person who would burn the world to save her. I wrote the check. I signed it with a flourish using the name of the shell company. I tore it out and held it up. Bennett reached for it, his fingers twitching. Ah, I said, pulling it back. The contract first. Alistair stepped forward from the hallway where he had been waiting silently. He placed the heavy leather binder on the table. Sign here, Mr. Sterling, Alistair said. And here. An initial here to acknowledge the transfer of all assets, including live-in staff. Bennett grabbed the pen. He signed his name so fast the ink barely had time to dry. He did not read a single word. He did not see the clause on page 4 regarding criminal liability. He did not see the forfeiture agreement on page 10. He just saw the zeros on the check I was holding. He finished signing and looked up, panting slightly. Done. It is yours. Now give me the money. I handed him the check. He grabbed it, staring at it like it was a holy relic. $8 million. He was rich. He was safe. Get your things, I said, my voice dropping an octave, losing the polished accent, returning to the gravel of Langston Thorne. You have 10 minutes to get off my property. Bennett laughed, clutching the check. With pleasure. Come on, Chloe. We are leaving this dump. He grabbed Chloe's hand and they ran toward the door, not even looking back at Nia. I waited until the front door slammed shut. Then I dropped the cane. I took off the sunglasses. I walked over to the corner where my daughter stood trembling. She looked up at me. The fear was gone, replaced by a childlike wonder. You bought me, she whispered. I took her face in my hands, my thumbs brushing away the tears. No baby girl. I said, my voice cracking. I did not buy you. I brought you home. I pulled her into my arms and held her while she wept. But I did not cry. My eyes were dry. My work was not done. Bennett had the check, but he did not know what was waiting for him when he tried to cash it. And he did not know that the man who had just bought his house was about to become his worst nightmare. I looked out the window at Bennett and Chloe celebrating in the driveway. Laugh while you can, I thought, because the check is just the bait, and the trap is about to snap shut. Bennett dragged my daughter to the antique writing desk in the corner of the room, the same desk where she used to draw pictures of our family when she was a child, and slammed a blank sheet of paper in front of her. He looked at me with a manic grin, his eyes darting between the checkbook in my pocket and his wife. I need this to be legal, he spat, his voice trembling with a mixture of adrenaline and avarice. Write it down, Nia. Write that you are voluntarily entering the employment of this man. Write that you are leaving with him of your own free will. Nia stared at the blank page, her hands shaking so violently that they looked like fluttering birds. She did not pick up the pen. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide pools of terror and confusion. She saw a stranger in an expensive suit, but she also felt something else, a pull, a memory, a ghost. She was trying to reconcile the image of the powerful man before her with the dirty gardener she had met in the yard. Pick up the pen, Bennett hissed, leaning close to her ear. His hand rested on her shoulder, but I saw his thumb dig into the soft flesh of her neck right over the bruise he had left there yesterday. Do not make me hurt you here, Nia. Not in front of the guests. Sign the paper and you never have to see me again. Sign the paper and you are free. Free. The word hung in the air like a taunt. He was selling her into what he thought was slavery to a stranger, yet he called it freedom. It was the ultimate gaslighting. Nia picked up the heavy fountain pen. It was gold-plated, engraved with my initials LT. Bennett had stolen it from my safe years ago, and now he was forcing my daughter to use it to sign away her life. She held it awkwardly, her fingers stiff from scrubbing floors and washing clothes in cold water. She looked at the paper. She hesitated. I remembered teaching her to write her name. I remembered sitting at this very desk, holding her small hand, guiding the loops of the N and the dot of the I. I had told her then that her signature was her bond, that it was the most valuable thing she owned because it represented her word. Do not sign anything you do not believe in, Nia, I had said. She lowered the pen. She looked at Bennett and shook her head, a tiny, imperceptible movement. No, she whispered. I am a thorn. I do not belong to anyone. Bennett's face turned a violent shade of purple. He forgot about the money for a second. He forgot about me. All he saw was defiance from a creature he thought he had broken. He raised his hand, ready to strike her right there in the middle of the closing. I slammed the head of my dragon cane onto the marble floor. The sound was like a gunshot. Mr. Sterling, I boomed, my voice filling the room. If you touch the merchandise, the deal is off. I do not buy damaged goods. Bennett froze his hand in midair. He looked at me then at the $8 million check I was holding. He lowered his hand, slowly smoothing his hair. He forced a smile that looked more like a rictus of pain. Of course, he said, panting. She is just being difficult. She is confused. I walked over to the desk. I stood between Bennett and my daughter. I looked down at her. I needed her to trust me. I needed her to take this step so I could get her out of this house before the violence started. Sign the paper, child. I said, my voice soft but commanding. It is just a piece of paper. It is the key to the cage. She looked up at me. She saw my eyes behind the dark glasses. She saw the scar on my hand. She recognized it. She took a deep breath. She pressed the nib of the pen to the paper. The ink flowed black and permanent. She wrote her name not as Nia Sterling, but as Nia Thorne. She underlined it twice, just like I used to do. She pushed the paper toward me. Bennett snatched it up before I could touch it. There he crowed, waving the paper in the air. She is yours. She agreed. Now give me the money. He was vibrating with greed. He looked like an addict who had been denied a fix for too long. He extended his hand, palm up, fingers twitching, expecting me to hand over the check immediately. I reached into my jacket pocket. I did not pull out the check. I pulled out a signal. I nodded to Marcus, who was standing by the front door like a statue carved from obsidian. Marcus stepped outside and returned a moment later carrying a large aluminum briefcase. He walked to the center of the room and placed it on the coffee table. The sound of the latches clicking open was loud in the silent room. Click, click. Marcus lifted the lid. Inside, stacked in neat rows, were bundles of $100 bills, $500,000 in cash, the down payment. The rest would be wired upon completion of the contract. The smell of the money filled the room, the scent of paper and ink and power. Bennett made a noise in the back of his throat, a whimper of pure desire. He lunged for the case. He wanted to touch it. He wanted to bury his face in it. He saw his salvation. He saw his debts disappearing. He saw Chloe and first-class tickets to Europe. I brought my cane down across the open case, slamming the lid shut just inches from his fingers. He recoiled, looking at me with shock and anger. Manners, Mr. Sterling, I said coldly. We are not savages. We sign the contract first. Then you get the cash. Then you get the wire transfer. Bennett licked his lips. His eyes were glued to the silver case. Yes. Yes, of course. The contract. Where is it? Alistair stepped forward. He placed a thick leather-bound document on the table next to the money. It was 20 pages long, filled with dense legal text. Alistair flipped it open to the signature page. Sign here, Alistair said, handing Bennett a pen. And initial here, here, and here. Bennett grabbed the pen. He did not read a single word. He did not look at the clauses. He did not ask about the terms. He just wanted the money. He signed his name with a flourish. Bennett Sterling. He initialed the boxes rapidly, his hand shaking with haste. Wait, I said just as he was about to sign the final line. Bennett looked up, sweat beading on his forehead. What? What is it now? Read clause 44, I said, pointing to a paragraph printed in bold text right above the final signature line. It is a standard morality and origin of assets clause. My investors insist on it. Bennett laughed nervously. I do not care about clauses. I just want to sell. Read it, I commanded, my voice dropping to a growl. Or the briefcase leaves with me. Bennett huffed and looked down at the text. He read it aloud, his voice rushing. The seller warrants that the property and all associated assets were obtained legally and without coercion. The seller further warrants that no criminal acts including fraud, domestic abuse, or unlawful imprisonment have occurred on the premises. Violation of this clause results in immediate forfeiture of the purchase price and admission of guilt in a court of law. He looked up. What is this garbage? It is boilerplate nonsense. It is a binding confession, Bennett, I thought. It is the nail in your coffin. It is a formality, I said aloud, shrugging. If you have nothing to hide, Mr. Sterling, it should not be a problem. Unless, of course, you have committed fraud or abuse in this house. Bennett looked at Nia standing in the corner. He looked at the walls that had witnessed 10 years of his cruelty. He looked at the briefcase full of cash. He made the calculation. He thought he was smarter than the law. He thought he could take the money and run before anyone figured out what he had done. He thought the old man in front of him was just a stupid investor. I have nothing to hide, he lied, looking me straight in the eye. Then sign it, I said. Bennett lowered the pen. He pressed the tip against the paper. This was it. The moment he signed, he was not just selling a house. He was signing a legal document that would be used by the FBI, the district attorney, and my private legal team to bury him under the jail for the rest of his natural life. He was admitting that if any abuse was found, he forfeited the money, and I had hours of video evidence of that abuse. He signed. The scratch of the pen on the paper sounded like thunder to me. He finished the signature with a sharp line. He dropped the pen and looked at me triumphantly. Done, he said. It is signed. The house is yours. The girl is yours. Now give me the money. I reached out and took the contract. I handed it to Alistair, who immediately placed it in his briefcase and locked it. The trap was sprung. The steel jaws had snapped shut around Bennett's leg, and he did not even feel the pain yet. I looked at Bennett. I looked at the sweat on his upper lip, the greed in his eyes, the arrogance that radiated off him like heat. I looked at my daughter, who was watching me with held breath, waiting for the signal. I picked up the aluminum briefcase. I felt its weight. I held it out to Bennett. He reached for it with both hands, his face breaking into a wide, ecstatic grin. I pulled it back slightly. Release her, I said. Bennett blinked. What? Tell her she is free, I commanded. Say the words. Tell her she is no longer your property. Tell her she is no longer your wife. Tell her she is free to go. Bennett rolled his eyes. He turned to Nia. You heard the man. Get out. You are fired. You are divorced. You are free. Go with him. I never want to see your face again. Nia let out a sob. It was a sound of pure relief. She took a step toward me, then another. She walked past Bennett without looking at him. She came to my side and stood there trembling. I put my arm around her, feeling her bony shoulders under the thin fabric of her dress. Good, I said. I handed the briefcase to Bennett. He grabbed it, hugging it to his chest like a long-lost lover. Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice cold as the grave. Bennett did not even answer. He was already fumbling with the latches, trying to open the case, trying to see his fortune. Come, Nia, I whispered, guiding her toward the door. Do not look back. We walked out of the living room into the foyer. I could hear the clicks of the briefcase latches opening behind us. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. I opened the front door and the bright sunlight hit our faces. It was the light of a new day. It was the light of justice. Then from the living room came a scream. It was not a scream of joy. It was a scream of raw, primal fury. It was the sound of a man who had just looked into a briefcase expecting $500,000 and found only his own destruction. I stopped on the porch. I turned back toward the open door. I smiled. Run, Bennett, I whispered to the air. Run while you can. The scream that tore through the air was not human. It was the sound of a wounded animal realizing the trap had finally snapped shut. I stopped on the porch and turned slowly, enjoying the moment with a cold satisfaction that had been 10 years in the making. Through the open door, I watched Bennett Sterling fall to his knees in front of the aluminum briefcase. The lid was thrown wide open, but instead of the green glow of $500,000 in cash, the interior was filled with stacks of plain white paper. They were not blank, though. They were high-resolution photocopies of every crime Bennett had committed in the last decade. Bennett grabbed a handful of the papers, his hands shaking so hard he ripped them. He stared at the top sheet. It was a copy of the forged death certificate he had filed for me 2 years ago, signed by a corrupt doctor we had already pressured into confessing. He threw it aside and grabbed another. It was a printout of his text messages to the loan sharks promising them the house in exchange for his life. The third was a copy of an arrest warrant drafted that very morning by the district attorney charging Bennett Sterling with fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder. There was no money, there was no salvation, there was only evidence. He looked up, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. He looked at the empty space where the money should have been, and then he looked at the door where I stood watching him. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The Orion Group did not exist. The deal was a sham. He had just signed a confession admitting to his crimes and forfeiting the property, and in exchange he had received a box full of his own nightmares. "You," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You tricked me. You knew." He scrambled to his feet, kicking the briefcase over. The papers fluttered into the air, raining down around him like confetti at a funeral. He looked around the room, his eyes wild, searching for an escape, searching for a weapon, searching for someone to blame. His gaze landed on Chloe, who was standing by the window clutching her purse. "You did this!" he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You told someone! You sold me out!" Chloe backed away, terrified. "Bennett, I did not do anything, I swear!" "Liar!" he roared. He was unraveling completely, the facade of the sophisticated businessman crumbling to reveal the desperate thug underneath. He charged toward the door, toward me, his face purple with rage. "Give me my contract back," he shouted, lunging for me. "Tear it up. The deal is off." I did not move. I stood in the doorway, blocking his path to freedom. My driver Marcus stepped forward, ready to intercept, but I held up a hand. This was between me and the man who stole my life. "The deal is done, Bennett," I said, my voice calm and steady. "You signed. You confessed. It is over." Bennett stopped a few feet away from me, panting heavily. He looked at my face, really looked at me for the first time. He saw the expensive suit, the gold watch, the dragon cane. But he also saw something else. He saw the lack of fear. He saw a man who was not afraid of a bully. And then the desperation took over completely. He reached behind his back under the tailored jacket of his suit. I knew what was coming. I had seen that move in the jungle. I had seen it in business meetings gone wrong. It was the move of a coward who has run out of options. He pulled a gun. It was a snub-nosed revolver, ugly and black against the expensive fabric of his suit. He leveled it at my chest, his hand shaking violently. "Give me the contract," he screamed, spit flying from his lips. "Give it to me or I will kill you right here. I have nothing to lose, old man. I am already dead if I do not get that money." I looked at the barrel of the gun. It was a dark tunnel promising oblivion. But I had looked into the face of death every day for 10 years. A gun in the hands of a soft, panicked social climber did not scare me. "Shoot," I said, spreading my arms. "Add murder to the list, Bennett. It will not change anything. The contract is already with my lawyer. The police are already on their way. Shooting me just ensures you die in prison instead of rotting there." Bennett's eyes darted around the room. He was looking for a way out, but there was none. He swung the gun toward Naya, who was standing behind me, shivering in the sunlight. "Move," he yelled at me. "Move or I will shoot the girl. I will kill her. I swear I will." My heart stopped. He was aiming at my daughter. The rage that exploded in my chest was blinding. I took a step forward, intending to shield her, but Bennett was faster. He lunged, grabbing Nia by her thin arm and hauling her in front of him, using her as a human shield. He pressed the barrel of the gun against her temple. "Back off," he screamed, dragging her back into the house. "Everyone back off, or I will paint the walls with her brains." Naya was whimpering, a sound of pure terror. She looked at me, her eyes wide and pleading. "Daddy," she whispered. "Let her go, Bennett," I said, my voice dropping to a growl. "This is between us." "No, she is my insurance," he shouted, backing toward the kitchen. "I am taking her with me. If I get away, she lives. If you follow me, she dies." He was going to kill her. I saw it in his eyes. He was not going to let her live to testify. He was going to drag her out the back door, take her to the woods, and execute her just like he had tried to do to us on the cliff. I tightened my grip on my cane. I needed an opening. I needed a single second of distraction. And then my daughter gave it to me. Nia stopped whimpering. Her body went rigid in his grasp. She looked at the gun pressed against her head. She looked at the man who had tormented her for a decade. And then she looked at me. I saw the change happen. The fear in her eyes was replaced by something else, something fierce and ancient. She was a thorn. and thorns do not die on their knees. Bennett shifted his grip, trying to get a better hold on her neck. In that split second, Nia moved. She did not pull away. She dropped her head and sank her teeth into the fleshy part of Bennett's hand, the hand holding the gun. She bit down with all the strength of a woman who has been starved and beaten and silenced for 10 years. She bit down until her teeth met bone. Bennett screamed a high-pitched sound of shock and pain. He tried to shake her off, but she held on like a pit bull. His hand spasmed. The gun went off. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet went wild, smashing into the crystal chandelier above our heads. Glass rained down on us like diamonds. Bennett let go of Nia, dropping the gun as he clutched his bleeding hand. "You bit me, you crazy witch," he howled, staring at the blood welling up on his skin. Nia spat his blood onto the marble floor. She scrambled backward, crawling away from him, her eyes blazing. I did not wait. The moment the gun hit the floor, I moved. I covered the distance between us in 2 long strides. I did not need Marcus. I did not need the police. I needed my cane. Bennett looked up just as I swung. He saw the golden dragon head arcing through the air. He tried to raise his hands to protect his face, but he was too slow. The heavy gold handle connected with the side of his knee. There was a sickening crunch of bone shattering. Bennett collapsed, screaming, clutching his leg. He hit the floor hard, writhing in agony. I did not stop. I brought the cane down again, striking him across the shoulder, pinning him to the ground. He gasped the air, leaving his lungs. I planted the tip of the cane in the center of his chest, right over his heart, and leaned my full weight onto it. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with tears and terror. "Please," he wheezed. "Please do not kill me. I will give you anything. Who are you? Why are you doing this?" I looked down at him. I looked at the man who had turned my palace into a dungeon. I reached up and slowly removed my dark sunglasses. I let them drop to the floor. I narrowed my eyes, staring into his soul, letting him see the familiar lines of my face, the intensity of my gaze. I leaned closer until my face was inches from his. "Look at me, Bennett," I whispered. "Look closely." He squinted, trying to focus through the pain. He looked at my eyes. He looked at the scar on my cheek, hidden before by the beard. Recognition dawned slowly, horrible and cold. "No," he whispered. "It cannot be. You are dead." "I am not dead," I said, "and I am not the investor." I stood up straight, towering over him. "I am the man whose roses you let die," I said, my voice booming through the silent house. "I am the man whose daughter you enslaved. I am the man you tried to frame for stealing a watch." Bennett's jaw dropped. "You," he gasped. "You are the gardener." I smiled a cold, terrible smile. "I was the gardener yesterday, Bennett," I said. "But today I am the landlord, and your rent is overdue." Bennett started to sob, a broken, pathetic sound. He realized the magnitude of his mistake. He realized that the dirty old man he had kicked and insulted was the architect of his destruction. He had handed the keys to his kingdom to the king himself. I turned to Nia. She was standing by the wall, shaking but safe. I held out my hand. "Come here, baby girl," I said softly. She ran to me, burying her face in my chest. I held her tight, shielding her from the sight of the broken man on the floor. "It is over," I told her. "He can never hurt you again." Bennett groaned on the floor, trying to crawl away. "My leg," he moaned. "You broke my leg." I looked at him with zero sympathy. "Consider it a down payment," I said. "The rest of the debt will be collected shortly." I looked at the door. Sirens were wailing in the distance, getting closer. The police were coming, not the corrupt sheriff Bennett owned, but the federal agents Alistair had contacted. I looked at Bennett one last time. "You wanted a Master Bennett," I said. "You wanted someone to serve. Well, you are going to get your wish. In prison, everyone starts at the bottom." I turned my back on him and walked my daughter out of the house into the warm embrace of the afternoon sun, leaving the nightmare behind us on the cold marble floor. I did not call the police immediately because the police operate on procedures and rights, and I was not interested in Bennett Sterling having rights anymore. I was interested in the truth being laid bare in the middle of the living room he had stolen. I nodded to Marcus. He moved with the terrifying efficiency of a man trained for war. He dragged Bennett and Chloe to the center of the room. Bennett was still whimpering, clutching his shattered knee, while Chloe kicked and screamed threats that sounded hollow in the vast silence of the estate. Marcus forced them into 2 high-backed oak chairs facing each other. He used heavy industrial zip ties to bind their hands behind their backs and their ankles to the chair legs. Bennett groaned as the plastic bit into his skin, but I felt no pity. He was finally experiencing a fraction of the helplessness he had inflicted on my daughter for a decade. I turned my back on them and focused on the sofa where Nia sat shivering. I had called Dr. Evans, my private physician, while we were en route. He arrived 10 minutes later, flanked by 2 nurses carrying heavy medical cases. He was a specialist in trauma, a man I had flown in on my private jet because I trusted no one else. He opened his bag and began to work immediately, his face setting into a grim mask as he took in Nia's condition. I stood by her, holding her hand, stroking her hair, whispering that she was safe while he checked her vitals. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by Bennett's ragged breathing and the click of medical instruments. Dr. Evans lifted the hem of Nia's shirt gently to check her ribs. I heard his sharp intake of breath. He looked at me, his eyes hard and angry. "Mr. Thorne, this is barbaric. She weighs 85 pounds. She is severely dehydrated. Her skin is paper thin. But that is not the worst of it." He pointed to a series of jagged ridges along her rib cage. "These are old fractures. At least 3 ribs were broken and healed badly without medical attention. Her left ulna shows signs of a hairline fracture that is currently infected." He paused, pulling a rapid test strip from his kit. He pricked her finger. "And the blood work," he said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "She has toxic levels of benzodiazepines and antipsychotics in her system. They have been chemically lobotomizing her to keep her docile. If she had stayed on this regimen for another month, her kidneys would have failed." I looked at Bennett. He tried to look away, but I grabbed his chin and forced him to look at the skeletal woman he had tortured. "Look at her," I said, my voice devoid of mercy. "Look at your wife. You broke her bones and you did not even give her an aspirin. You starved her while you ate steak in the next room. You drugged her to erase her mind." Bennett stammered, sweat pouring down his face. "She fell. She is clumsy. It was not me. She did it to herself." "Liar," I said. I released his chin with a shove that snapped his head back. "You are a liar, Bennett, and today your lies end." I walked to the massive 80-inch television mounted above the fireplace. Bennett loved this television. He used it to watch golf and feel superior to the world. Today he was going to watch his own damnation. I pulled a small black remote from my pocket. When I was the gardener, I did not just rake leaves, Bennett. I installed micro cameras in the vents. I put them in the kitchen. I put them in the pantry. I saw everything you did when you thought no one was watching. I pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. The image was high definition, crystal clear. It showed the kitchen dated 2 weeks ago. Bennett was eating a sandwich, leaning against the counter. Nia was on her hands and knees, scrubbing the floor. On the screen, Bennett kicked the bucket of soapy water over soaking Nia's dress. When she tried to stand up, he grabbed her by the hair and slammed her face into the wet tile. The sound of the impact echoed through the living room, amplified by the surround sound system. It was a sickening crunch. Chloe was in the background of the video, laughing and filming it on her phone. "Look at the little maid," Chloe said on the recording, her voice shrill and cruel. "She cannot even clean right. Maybe she needs a lesson." I fast-forwarded. The next clip showed the basement. It was dark, but the night vision camera picked up every detail. Bennett was standing over Nia, holding a belt. He struck her. Once. Twice. 3 times. Nia did not scream in the video. She just curled into a ball and took it. The room was filled with the ghosts of their cruelty. I turned up the volume. The sounds of Nia begging for mercy filled the air, drowning out Bennett's whimpers in the present. Chloe stared at the screen, her face pale as a sheet. She saw herself not as a victim, but as a monster. She saw the truth of her soul projected in high definition. "Turn it off!" Chloe screamed, straining against her bonds. "Please turn it off. I cannot watch it. I did not want to do it. He made me. He said she was dangerous." Bennett whipped his head around, staring at his mistress with pure hatred. "Shut up, you witch," he shouted. "It was your idea to drug her. You said she was too loud. You said you wanted her out of the house so you could redecorate. You told me to put her in the basement." Chloe sobbed, shaking her head violently, the denial pouring out of her. "No, you told me she was crazy. You told me Langston abused her and we had to control her. You lied to me, Bennett. You said you had money. You said this was all yours. You said she was just a burden we had to manage until she died." I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound that cut through their bickering. "Money," I said. "Let us talk about money, since that is the only language you vermin speak." I picked up a thick file from the coffee table. It was the financial forensic report Alistair had compiled. I threw it at Bennett's feet. The papers scattered across the floor, mixing with his blood. "You do not just owe the loan sharks, Bennett. You stole $5 million from my company accounts using forged signatures before I even crashed. You drained Nia's trust fund, you liquidated her jewelry, you maxed out credit cards in the name of a woman you were holding prisoner. You forged my signature on deed transfers, you embezzled from the charity fund I set up for orphans." Bennett looked at the papers. He saw the bank transfers, he saw the audit trail. He realized that I had known everything before I even stepped foot in the house. He realized that while he was playing master of the manor, I was buying the bank that owned him. "You are not a businessman, Bennett," I said, leaning over him. "You are a parasite, and you are broke. The house is mine. The accounts are frozen. The loan sharks sold your debt to me this morning. You owe me $5 million plus interest. And Bennett, I collect." Chloe looked at Bennett with disgust. "You are broke," she whispered. "You promised me Paris. You promised me a villa in Tuscany. You have nothing. You are nothing." Bennett looked at her, then at me, then at the empty briefcase. He realized he was alone. He realized the game was not just over. The board had been burned. "I did it for us," Bennett shouted at Chloe, desperate to shift the blame. "I bought you the car. I paid for your face. I did it all for you. You did it because you are weak," I said. "And now you are going to pay." I looked at the doctor. "Is she stable enough to move?" I asked. Dr. Evans nodded. "We need to get her to a hospital for a full scan, but she is stable." "Good," I said. "Take her to the car." I did not want Nia to see what happened next. I did not want her to witness the final act of this tragedy. Marcus helped the nurses lift Nia. She looked at me, her eyes full of trust. "Daddy," she whispered, "are you coming? I will be right behind you, baby girl, I promised. I just have to take out the trash." As they carried Nia out, I turned back to the two people tied to the chairs. The video on the screen was still playing on a loop, a constant reminder of their sins. Now I said, picking up my cane, "Let us discuss the interest on that loan." With Nia safe in the ambulance, the atmosphere in the room shifted from rescue to demolition. I turned my attention back to the two prisoners bound in the chairs. Bennett was sweating profusely, his eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape that did not exist. I picked up my phone and dialed a short code. A moment later, the front door opened and 4 men in heavy work boots and construction gear walked in carrying sledgehammers and crowbars. They did not look at the prisoners. They looked only at me, waiting for orders. Bennett struggled against the zip ties, his face going pale. "What is this?" he stammered. "What are you doing? You already have the house. Why are you destroying it?" I ignored him. I walked to the north wall of the living room, the one that separated the grand salon from the kitchen. It was a load-bearing wall covered in expensive silk wallpaper that Bennett had installed to cover up the original oak paneling. I ran my hand along the surface, feeling for the hollow spot I had identified on the blueprints weeks ago. I tapped the wall with the head of my cane. It made a dull thud. "Right here," I said to the foreman. "Tear it down. I want it opened up from floor to ceiling." The foreman nodded and hefted his sledgehammer. Bennett let out a shriek that sounded more like a banshee than a man. "No," he screamed, thrashing so hard the chair rocked on its legs. "No, not that wall. Stop them. You cannot do this. It is structural. You will bring the roof down." I turned to him, my expression impassive. "I built this house, Bennett. I know exactly what holds it up, and it is certainly not you. Break it down." The first blow struck the wall with a thunderous crash. Plaster dust exploded into the air. Bennett began to hyperventilate. He was screaming incoherently, begging, pleading, offering me money he did not have, offering me, Chloe offering me his soul if only I would stop the men. Chloe looked at him, confused by his sheer panic. She did not understand. She thought he was just worried about the property value. She did not know that Bennett Sterling never cared about anything unless it directly affected his survival. The men worked with brutal efficiency. The drywall crumbled. The studs were exposed. Bennett was sobbing now, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the dust and the blood from his nose. "Please," he moaned. "Please stop. It is all I have left." I signaled the men to pause. A large hole had been opened in the wall, revealing the dark space between the studs. I walked over and peered inside. There, sitting on the bottom plate wrapped in black, heavy-duty trash bags, was a lumpy shape about the size of a basketball. I reached in and pulled it out. It was heavy. I carried it to the center of the room and dropped it onto the coffee table. The sound it made was solid and metallic. Bennett squeezed his eyes shut, letting out a long, low moan of defeat. I pulled a pocket knife from my jacket and sliced the black plastic open. Inside was a velvet drawstring bag, the kind used by high-end jewelers. I loosened the strings and upended the bag. A cascade of fire and light spilled onto the table. Diamonds, rubies, emeralds, necklaces thick with gold antique brooches and rings set with stones the size of quail eggs. They sparkled in the afternoon sun, mocking the misery in the room with their brilliance. Chloe gasped, her eyes popping out of her head. "Is that real?" she whispered. I picked up a necklace, a distinct piece made of platinum and sapphires shaped like teardrops. I knew this piece. I had bought it for my wife Nia's mother for our 30th anniversary. It was the last gift I ever gave her before she passed. "You told me you sold them," I said to Bennett, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "You told the police that burglars took them. You told Nia that you had to sell them to pay for her medical bills." Bennett did not answer. He just hung his head. "But you did not sell them," I continued. "You kept them. You stole my wife's legacy, and you hid it in the wall like a rat hiding cheese. Why, Bennett? Why keep them if you were so desperate for money? Because they are untraceable." Bennett whispered, his voice barely audible. "Cash can be frozen. Bank accounts can be seized. But diamonds fit in a pocket. They are my retirement plan. They were my ticket out of here when the house of cards fell." I looked at Chloe. Her face was a mask of shock that was slowly twisting into fury. She looked at the jewels, then at Bennett, then back at the jewels. "You told me you were broke," she said, her voice rising. "You told me we had to sell the house to pay the loan sharks. You told me you could not afford the trip to Paris because of the interest rates." Bennett refused to look at her. "You had millions in the wall," she screamed. "You let me sleep with that disgusting banker to get an extension on the car loan while you had millions sitting in the wall." "I did it for us," Bennett yelled back, desperate to spin the lie one last time. "I was saving it for our future." "Liar," she shrieked. "You were saving it for you. You were going to leave me. You were going to take the bag and run and leave me to deal with the sharks." She was right. Bennett had never planned to take anyone with him. He was a survivor of the parasitic variety. He would have left Nia to rot in the basement and Chloe to face the creditors while he sipped Mai Tais on a non-extradition island. Chloe lunged. She did not have a weapon, but she had nails, and she had the fury of a woman scorned. She threw herself sideways, toppling her chair and crashing into Bennett. Her hands, though bound behind her back, were useless, so she used her teeth. She bit his ear. She headbutted him in the nose. She screamed like a wild animal. "You bastard," she howled. "You used me. You made me torture that girl. You made me a monster, and you were going to dump me." Bennett screamed as her teeth tore into his ear. "Get her off me," he yelled. "She is crazy. Help." I watched them. I watched the two people who had destroyed my family tear each other apart. It was ugly, it was violent, and it was justice. They deserved each other. Marcus stepped forward to separate them, but I held up a hand. "Let them finish," I said. Chloe managed to kick Bennett in the shin right on the spot where I had broken his leg earlier. Bennett howled in agony, his face turning gray. He tried to kick back, but he was tied too tightly. They rolled on the floor, a tangle of expensive clothes and moral filth, grunting and cursing. Finally, when Bennett looked like he might actually pass out from the pain, I nodded to Marcus. He stepped in and hauled Chloe back upright, dragging her chair away from Bennett. She was panting, her mouth smeared with Bennett's blood, her eyes wild. "I hope you die," she spat at Bennett. "I hope they bury you under the jail." I turned my attention to the table. I began to gather the jewelry, putting each piece back into the velvet bag with reverence. These were not just stones. They were memories. They were the tangible proof of my love for my wife and her love for our daughter. I picked up the sapphire necklace. I held it up to the light. It was heavy, cool, and pure. It had survived the darkness of the wall just like my daughter had survived the darkness of the basement. "These do not belong to you, Bennett," I said, tightening the drawstring. "And they do not belong to the creditors. They belong to Nia. They are her birthright." I handed the bag to Marcus. "Put this in the safe in the car I ordered, and guard it with your life. When Nia wakes up, she is going to have her mother's diamonds back." She is going to have the financial freedom you tried to steal from her." Bennett watched the bag disappear, his eyes full of despair. It was over. His escape plan, his retirement, his safety net was gone. He was naked before his enemies. "You cannot take them," he whimpered. "The police will seize them as evidence." "The police will never know about them," I said, "because as far as the record shows, these were stolen years ago. I am just recovering stolen property, and you, Bennett, are not in a position to report a theft, are you?" I walked over to him. I looked down at his bloodied ear and his broken leg. "You thought you were the king of the castle," I said, "but you were just a squatter living in the walls. And now the exterminator is here." I checked my watch. It was almost time for the next phase. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the room. The air was getting colder. I turned to the construction crew. "You can go," I said. "You have done your job." They packed up their tools and left without a word. The room was silent again, save for the heavy breathing of the two prisoners. I sat down on the sofa facing them. I rested my hands on my cane. Now I said, "We wait." "Wait for what?" Chloe asked, her voice trembling. "The police." I smiled. "No, my dear, the police come later. First we have a meeting with the previous owners of Bennett's debt." Bennett's eyes widened in terror. "The Black Hammer." I nodded. "They are coming to collect Bennett. And since you do not have the house and you do not have the diamonds, I wonder what you are going to offer them." A car door slammed outside. Heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel. Bennett began to weep softly. I leaned back and crossed my legs. "It is time for you to meet your real masters, Bennett." The heavy oak front doors did not open. They exploded inward as if kicked by a giant. The sound echoed through the cavernous living room like a thunderclap shaking the crystal chandelier that I had just watched my daughter's husband destroy with a gunshot. Bennett flinched so hard in his chair that it tipped sideways, spilling him onto the floor, still bound and bleeding. Chloe screamed a high, thin sound of pure terror. I did not flinch. I sat on the velvet sofa, one leg crossed over the other, my hands resting casually on the head of my golden cane. I took a sip of the tea Marcus had poured for me and watched the darkness enter my home. 3 men walked through the shattered doorway. They brought the night air in with them, cold and smelling of ozone and gasoline. They were not police. They were not businessmen. They were predators. The man in the lead was a towering figure wearing a long leather trench coat that did not quite conceal the bulge of a submachine gun at his hip. His face was a roadmap of violent scars intersecting with tattoos that marked him as a high-ranking enforcer for the Black Hammer Syndicate. This was Kane. I knew his file. Alistair had briefed me. He was a man who collected debts with a blowtorch and pliers. Bennett scrambled backward on the floor, pushing himself with his good leg, trying to put distance between himself and the men he owed $2 million. His face was gray with shock, but then his eyes landed on me, sitting calmly on the sofa, and a desperate, manic idea sparked in his lizard brain. He saw a lifeline. He saw a scapegoat. Kane Bennett shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. "Thank God you are here. Listen to me. I have the money. I can pay you everything right now." Kane stopped in the center of the room. He looked at the hole in the wall where the diamonds had been. He looked at the smashed chandelier. He looked at Bennett lying in his own blood. He did not look impressed. "You are late, Bennett," Kane said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in the floorboards. The deadline was noon. "It is 6 p.m. The price has gone up. We are not here to talk. We are here to liquidate assets." "No, wait," Bennett screamed, struggling to sit up. "Look at him." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "That is Langston Thorne, the billionaire. He is alive. He has the money. He has millions in cash right here in the house. He tricked me. He stole the deed. Take him, kidnap him. He is worth 100 times what I owe you. Just take him and let me go." I watched Bennett try to sell my life to save his own skin. It was pathetic but entirely expected. He was a man without a bottom. He would feed his own children to wolves if it bought him 5 more minutes of survival. Chloe looked at him with renewed disgust, realizing that if he was willing to sell me, he had probably already sold her out too. Kane turned his head slowly. He looked at me. His eyes were dead black shark eyes. He took a step toward the sofa, his hand drifting toward his coat. Bennett laughed a wet, frantic sound. "Yes, get him," Bennett urged. "He is old. He is weak. Break his legs. Make him sign the checks. Do whatever you want to him. Just clear my debt." I placed my teacup on the saucer with a delicate clink. I did not stand up. I did not call for Marcus. I simply looked Kane in the eye and held his gaze. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with the potential for sudden violence. Bennett held his breath, waiting for the violence to start, waiting for me to be dragged off the sofa and beaten. Kane took another step. He reached into his coat. Bennett grinned, anticipating the gun. Instead, Kane pulled out a folded piece of paper. He stopped 3 feet from me. He did not draw a weapon. He did not threaten me. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect from one apex predator to another. Mr. Thorne, Kane said, his voice losing its threatening edge and becoming professional. My employer, Mr. Biggs, sends his regards. He apologizes for the intrusion. He wanted to make sure the transaction was handled personally. Bennett's grin froze. His brain could not process what he was seeing. The monster was apologizing to the victim. Thank you, Kane, I said, my voice calm and authoritative. I appreciate Mr. Biggs' promptness. The transaction was seamless. Transaction, Bennett whispered. What transaction? Alistair stepped forward from the shadows, holding a matching document. He walked past Kane without fear and handed the paper to Bennett. Read it, Mr. Sterling, Alistair said. Bennett's eyes darted across the page. It was a deed of assignment, a legal transfer of debt. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Alistair explained, his voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. Mr. Langston Thorne purchased your entire debt portfolio from the Black Hammer Syndicate. He bought the principal, the interest, and the right to collect. He paid 100 cents on the dollar plus a 20% premium for the inconvenience. Bennett dropped the paper. He looked at Kane. You sold me, he gasped. We are a business, Bennett, Kane said, shrugging. Mr. Thorne is a premium client. You are a bad investment. You missed 3 payments. You lied about your collateral. Mr. Thorne offered cash up front. It was just good business. I stood up, then leaning on my cane. I walked over to Bennett, who was staring at the floor as if the earth had opened up beneath him. You tried to sell me to them, Bennett, I said quietly. You tried to trade my life for your debt. But you forgot the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules, and I have all the gold. I am your creditor now, Bennett. I own your debt. I own your past. And right now I own your future. And unlike the bank, I do not accept payment plans. Bennett began to weep. It was the sound of a man who realized there was no one left to cheat, no one left to lie to. He was alone in a room full of people who wanted him to suffer. Please, he sobbed, grabbing the hem of my trousers. Uncle Langston, Dad, please. We are family. I made a mistake. I will work it off. I will do anything. Family. I repeated the word, tasting like ash in my mouth. You lost the right to use that word when you put my daughter in a basement. You are not family. You are a delinquent account. I turned to Kane. The debt is $2 million, I said, plus penalties. Obviously, he does not have the liquidity to pay. Obviously, Kane agreed, cracking his knuckles. However, I continued, I believe in traditional collection methods. I believe a debtor should understand the gravity of his obligations. I pointed to the open French doors that led to the garden where I had toiled as a servant, the garden where Bennett had kicked dirt in my face, the garden that was currently a mess of mud and thorns. Take him outside, I ordered. Bennett screamed as Kane's 2 subordinates grabbed him by the arms. They lifted him effortlessly, cutting the zip ties on his legs but leaving his hands bound. No, please, Bennett shrieked, kicking his legs. Not the garden. Langston, have mercy. I am begging you. Mercy is for the innocent, I said, turning my back on him. They dragged him out. His heels left grooves in the expensive rugs. He screamed all the way to the door, begging Chloe, begging Alistair, begging God. But no one answered. Chloe sat frozen in her chair, her face pale as death. She listened to the sounds of her lover being dragged across the patio. She heard him pleading with the gangsters. She heard the dull, heavy sound of fists meeting flesh. I walked to the window and looked out. It was dark now, but the garden lights were on. I saw them drag Bennett into the center of the overgrown rose garden, the very same roses he had forced Nia to tend with bleeding hands. They threw him into the mud. Teach him about compound interest, I said to Kane, who was standing by the door waiting for the final order. Kane nodded and walked out into the night. The sounds that followed were visceral. There were thuds, there were cracks, there were screams that started high and piercing and eventually degraded into low, wet sobs. I did not look away. I watched as they stripped him of his dignity, just as he had stripped my daughter of hers. They did not kill him. I had given strict orders. Death was too easy. They broke him. They taught him the physical reality of the pain he had inflicted on others for years. Chloe began to hyperventilate. She was shaking so hard the chair rattled against the floor. "Are you going to kill him?" she whispered. I turned from the window. "No," I said. "Dead men cannot go to prison, and Bennett is going to prison for a very long time. This is just the appetizer. The main course will be served in a 6x8 cell." The screaming in the garden stopped. There was only silence and the sound of crickets. A moment later, Kane walked back into the room. He wiped a speck of blood from his coat. "He is ready for transport," Kane said. "He will live, but he will limp, and he will remember this night every time it rains." "Good," I said. "Leave him there for the police. They will need to find him in a state that matches his resistance to arrest." Kane nodded. He pulled a business card from his pocket and placed it on the table. "Mr. Biggs says the account is settled. If you ever need to acquire more debt, Mr. Thorne, you know who to call." "I will keep that in mind," I said. The gangsters left as quickly and violently as they had arrived, vanishing into the night like smoke. I was left in the ruined living room with a terrified mistress, a loyal lawyer, and the silence of a house that had finally been purged. I looked at Alistair. "Call the feds," I said. "Tell them we have a fugitive ready for pickup, and tell them to bring an ambulance." He slipped in the garden. Alistair smiled a cold, satisfied smile. He slipped. "I will make sure to put that in the report." I sat back down on the sofa and poured myself another cup of tea. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. I had bought my house back. I had saved my daughter, and I had delivered justice with a hammer bought and paid for by the villain's own greed. I looked at Chloe. "Now, my dear," I said, "let us talk about your contribution to this household, because the police are coming and I think you have a very interesting story to tell them if you want to avoid joining Bennett in the ambulance." The silence in the living room was shattered by the aggressive wail of sirens cutting through the night air like a knife. But these were not the sirens of justice coming to save the day. They were the sirens of corruption coming to bury the truth. I remained seated on the velvet sofa, my hands resting calmly on my cane as 3 police cruisers screeched to a halt on the gravel driveway right next to the spot where Bennett lay groaning in the mud. Sheriff Miller burst through the open French doors with his service weapon drawn. He was sweating, his uniform strained across his belly, his eyes wild with panic. He did not look at the broken man in the garden. He did not look at the terrified mistress shivering in the corner. He trained his gun directly on my chest. "Freeze!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Put your hands where I can see them, Thorne. You are under arrest." Bennett saw the sheriff and a pathetic spark of hope ignited in his eyes. "Miller!" he shouted from the mud, trying to drag himself toward the house. "Help me! He is crazy. He hired gangsters. He tortured me. Shoot him, Miller. Kill him before he talks." Miller advanced into the room, his finger hovering over the trigger. He ignored Bennett's pleas, but his intention was clear. He was not here to arrest me. He was here to silence me. If I died tonight, Bennett would walk free and Miller's pension fund, which was built on Bennett's bribes, would remain secure. "I am arresting you for kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted murder," Miller barked, moving closer. "Get on your knees, old man. Do it now, or I will drop you where you stand." Alistair stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Sheriff, this is a private matter. We have contracts. We have confessions." "Shut up," Lawyer Miller yelled, swinging the gun toward Alistair. "You are an accomplice. I will bury you both. I run this town. I decide what is legal and what is not." I looked at Miller. I looked at the gun shaking in his hand. I did not raise my hands. I did not kneel. I simply took a sip of my tea and set the cup down on the saucer with a deliberate clink. "You do not run this town." "Sheriff," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "you just rent space in it, and your lease has just expired." Miller's face turned a violent shade of red. "Are you threatening an officer of the law?" he shouted. "I have the right to use lethal force. I have a witness right here who says you attacked him." He gestured to Chloe. She flinched, looking between the gun and me. "Tell him," Chloe, Miller demanded. "Tell him Thorne attacked you. Tell him he brought hitmen here." Chloe looked at me. She remembered the video. She remembered the files. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No," she whispered. "I will not lie for you anymore." Miller snarled. "Useless whore. I will deal with you later." He turned the gun back to me, his eyes narrowing. "Resistance to arrest," he muttered. "That is what I will put in the report." He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I have a suspect resisting." Shots fired. He was going to do it. He was going to pull the trigger and claim self-defense. It was the oldest trick in the book for a dirty cop. But he had forgotten one thing. I was Langston Thorne, and I never entered a room without owning the exits. "Wait," I said, holding up a single finger. "Before you shoot Sheriff, you might want to look at the television." Miller blinked, confused. "What?" "The television?" I repeated, pointing with my cane. "You are on air." I pressed a button on the small remote I had concealed in my palm. The massive 80-inch screen above the fireplace flickered. The image of Bennett beating Nia vanished, replaced by a live feed. But it was not just a camera feed. It was a broadcast. The screen showed the logo of WATL News, the largest station in Atlanta, a station I had acquired a controlling interest in 3 years ago through a shell corporation. The banner at the bottom of the screen read, "Breaking News Corruption in Buckhead." And there on the screen, live in high definition, was Sheriff Miller standing in my living room pointing a gun at an unarmed 71-year-old man. Miller's jaw dropped. He looked at the TV, then at me, then back at the TV. "How is that possible?" "Because I own the satellites, Sheriff," I said, standing up slowly. "And right now, every television in Atlanta is watching you threaten a victim of crime. Say hello to your voters, Miller. They are all watching." The image on the screen split. On the left was the live feed of Miller sweating and holding the gun. On the right, a pre-recorded video began to play. It was footage taken 6 months ago in the parking lot of a diner. It showed Miller leaning into Bennett's Porsche, accepting a thick brown envelope. The audio was crystal clear. "Make sure the old woman stays quiet," Bennett's voice said on the recording. "If she talks about the money, put her in a psych ward." "Consider it done," Miller's voice replied. "As long as the payments keep coming, she is as good as dead." Miller stared at the screen, his face draining of color. His gun hand wavered. He lowered the weapon slowly, the realization of his total destruction crashing down on him. His radio suddenly exploded with chatter. "Sheriff, this is dispatch. We are getting calls. Hundreds of calls. The news is here. What is going on?" Miller dropped the radio. He looked at me with the eyes of a trapped rat. "You ruined me," he whispered. "No, Sheriff," I corrected him. "You ruined yourself when you took money to help a man torture my daughter." I just turned on the lights. Outside, the sound of the local sirens was drowned out by a new, heavier sound. The rhythmic thumping of helicopter rotors shook the windows. Tires screeched on the asphalt, but these were not police cruisers. These were heavy armored SUVs. Alistair checked his watch. "Right on time," he said. The front door, which was already hanging off its hinges, was kicked open for the second time that night. But this time it was not gangsters. It was a swarm of men in blue windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back. FBI. Federal agents dropped the weapon. A voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Miller dropped his gun as if it were burning hot. He raised his hands, his knees knocking together. He knew it was over. Local cops he could bully. Local judges he could bribe. But the FBI did not play by his rules, especially when the evidence had just been broadcast to 3 million people. Agents swarmed the room. They shoved Miller against the wall, cuffing him with a satisfying click. "You have the right to remain silent," an agent barked, though Miller was already babbling incoherently about entrapment and misunderstandings. Another team of agents headed for the garden. I watched from the window. They found Bennett trying to crawl into the bushes, dragging his shattered leg. He was covered in mud, blood, and his own filth. When he saw the federal agents, he did not fight. He just collapsed, weeping, into the dirt. They dragged him back into the house. He looked pathetic. The arrogant socialite who had sneered at me at the gate was gone. In his place was a broken criminal facing decades in a federal penitentiary. They hauled him through the living room, past the hole in the wall, past the empty briefcase, past me. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with hatred and despair. "You planned this." He spat, blood dripping from his chin. "You planned every second. Every single one," I agreed. Just then, the front door opened again. The paramedics were bringing Nia back in. We had to wait for the scene to be cleared before taking her to the hospital, but she insisted on seeing him one last time. She was sitting in a wheelchair, wrapped in a blanket, her face clean but bruised. Bennett saw her. A twisted look crossed his face, a last desperate attempt at manipulation. "Nia," he cried, struggling against the agents holding him. "Nia, baby, tell them. Tell them it was an accident. Tell them I love you. I am your husband. You have to help me." The room went silent. The agents paused, looking at the frail woman in the wheelchair. I tensed, ready to step in, ready to protect her from his lies. But Nia held up a hand, stopping me. She signaled the nurse to push her forward. She stopped the wheelchair inches from Bennett. She looked down at him, at the man who had owned her life for 10 years. Husband, she whispered the word, testing it on her tongue. Yes, Bennett said, nodding frantically, hope flaring in his eyes. Yes, I am your husband. We are a team. We can fix this. Just tell them to let me go. Nia looked at his broken leg. She looked at his handcuffed wrists. She looked at the fear in his eyes. You are not my husband, she said, her voice gaining strength. You are just the man who rented my house. And then, with a speed and ferocity that shocked everyone in the room, she leaned forward and slapped him. It was not a weak slap, it was an open-handed strike that connected with his cheek with a crack that echoed off the walls. It was the sound of 10 years of rage being released in a single motion. Bennett's head snapped back. He stared at her in shock. My husband died in a plane crash 10 years ago, Nia said, her voice cold and final. You are just a ghost. And I do not believe in ghosts anymore. Take him away, she said to the agents. He smells like garbage. The agents nodded, a newfound respect in their eyes. They dragged Bennett out the door, his screams fading into the night as they threw him into the back of a federal transport van. Miller followed him, his head hung low in shame. I walked over to Nia. I put my hand on her shoulder. She reached up and covered my hand with hers. Her grip was weak, but it was steady. I am proud of you, baby girl, I whispered. She looked up at me, her eyes clear for the first time in a decade. Let us go home, Daddy, she said. I want to plant some new roses. I smiled. The nightmare was over. The house was ours again, and the weeds had finally been pulled. We will plant a whole garden, I promised, and this time we will make sure nothing ever kills them again. 1 month had passed since the night the blue lights flashed and the monsters were dragged away in chains. The estate in Buckhead no longer looked like a mausoleum built to house my daughter's misery. I had hired a crew of 50 men to purge every trace of Bennett Sterling from the property. We ripped out the carpets he had walked on. We burned the furniture he had sat on. The heavy velvet drapes that had kept the house in a perpetual state of gloom were thrown into a dumpster. I wanted sunlight. I wanted air. I wanted the house to breathe again, just like my daughter was learning to do. The walls were now painted a soft, warm cream color that caught the morning light. The windows were thrown wide open, allowing the scent of jasmine and freshly cut grass to drift through the rooms. The silence that filled the hallways was no longer the heavy, terrified silence of a prison. It was the peaceful silence of a sanctuary. I sat on the new patio furniture watching the garden. The weeds were gone. The roses were pruned and feeding on fresh soil. The fountain was running again, the gentle sound of water masking the phantom echoes of screams that sometimes still tried to creep into my mind. I took a sip of black coffee. It tasted good. For 10 years I had dreamed of this coffee while drinking muddy water in a jungle hell. But the best view was not the garden. It was Nia. She was sitting on a stone bench near the fountain reading a book. She looked different. The skeletal figure that had trembled in the kitchen was gone. She had gained weight, not much, but enough to look human again. Her skin had lost that gray prison pallor, but the biggest change was her hair. She had cut it all off. The long, matted locks that Bennett used to drag her across the floor were gone. She wore a sharp, chic bob that framed her face and highlighted her eyes. She looked like a warrior who had cut off her braids to prepare for battle. However, I knew the scars on her soul were still fresh. I saw it in the way her hand trembled when a door slammed. I saw it in the way she checked the exits whenever she entered a room. The house was bright, but the shadows inside her mind were still long and dark. I walked over to the bench, my cane tapping softly on the flagstones. She looked up and smiled, but the smile did not reach her eyes. It was a fragile thing, a porcelain mask ready to shatter. Mind if I sit? I asked. She shifted, making room for me. Never, Daddy. We sat in silence for a moment, watching a cardinal land on the fountain. It is beautiful here now, she said, her voice soft. You fixed it, just like you fix everything. I did not fix it, Nia, I said. I just cleared the brush. The roots are still deep. She looked down at her hands. Her fingers were twisting together, a nervous habit she had developed in the basement. I feel like a ghost, she whispered. I walk through these rooms and I remember things. I remember him laughing at me. I remember Chloe spitting on me. I look in the mirror and I do not see Nia Thorne. I see the maid. I see the victim. You are not a victim, I said firmly. You are a survivor. No, she said, shaking her head, tears welling up in her eyes. I was weak, Daddy. I was so weak. I let him do it. I let him take everything. I let him hit me. I signed the papers. I believed him when he said I was crazy. She turned to me, the tears spilling over. Why didn't I fight? She asked, her voice breaking. Why didn't I run? You fought. You survived a plane crash. You walked out of a jungle. You came back from the dead. But me, I just stayed in the basement and waited to die. I am not like you. I am pathetic. I am a disgrace to the Thorn name. I felt my heart crack. This was the conversation I had been dreading, the conversation I knew we had to have. I took her hands in mine. They were still rough from the scrubbing brushes, but they were warm. Listen to me, Nia, I said, my voice rough with emotion. Look at me. She raised her tear-filled eyes. It was not your fault, I said. It was mine. She blinked, confused. What? No. He was the monster. He was the monster. Yes, I agreed. But I was the architect. I built the cage. I stood up and paced in front of the bench, leaning on my cane. I raised you to be a princess, Nia, I said. I gave you everything. The best schools, the best clothes, the big house. I wanted you to have a life of ease because my life had been a war. I wanted to protect you from the ugliness of the world. I stopped and looked at her, but I made a mistake. A terrible, fatal mistake. I protected you so much that I forgot to teach you how to fight. I raised a hothouse flower and then I planted you in the middle of a battlefield. I gave you money, but I did not give you armor. When I handed Bennett the keys to this house, I did not just give him property. I gave him a lamb. Nia was crying silently now, listening intently. I failed you, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. I left you alone with a predator, and you did not have the tools to defend yourself because I never gave them to you. I thought money was protection. I was wrong. Money is just bait. I sat back down beside her. You survived 10 years of psychological torture, Nia. You survived drugs, starvation, and beatings. You survived a man who wanted to erase your existence. And when the moment came, when the gun was at your head, you bit him. You fought back. You saved me. I took her chin in my hand. You are not weak. You possess a strength I do not have. My strength is loud. It is violence. It is money. Your strength is endurance. You held on to your sanity in the dark for a decade. That is not weakness, baby girl. That is iron. You are more of a thorn than I ever was. Nia looked at me. The shame in her eyes was slowly being replaced by something else. Understanding. Acceptance. You really think so? She whispered. I know so, I said. And now it is time to use that iron. It is time to stop being the survivor and start being the architect. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. It was heavy, stamped with the seal of my legal firm. I placed it in her lap. What is this? She asked, wiping her eyes. I tapped the envelope. That is your weapon, I said. She opened it. Inside was a stack of legal documents topped by a certificate of incorporation. She read the name at the top, the Phoenix Foundation. I liquidated the assets I seized from Bennett, I explained. The car, the hidden accounts, the investments he made with stolen money. Plus I added $50 million of my own. It is a $100 million endowment, Nia, and it is all yours. She looked up at me, her mouth open in shock. Mine. Yours, I said. You are the CEO. You have full control. No board of directors, no oversight, just you. But what do I do with it? She asked. Whatever you want, I said. But I have a suggestion. Bennett and Chloe hurt you because they could. Because you had no resources. Because you were alone. There are thousands of women out there right now, Nia. Women trapped in basements. Women trapped in abusive marriages. Women who think they are crazy because someone is gaslighting them. I leaned in close. Use this money to burn their cages down, I said. Hire lawyers, hire private investigators, buy safe houses, pay for therapy, be the person you needed 10 years ago. Nia looked down at the documents. Her hands stopped trembling. She ran her fingers over the seal. She thought about the women she had met in the hospital, the women who had looked at her bruises with knowing eyes. She thought about the powerlessness she had felt for a decade. And then she looked at me. The fire was back. The same fire I had seen when she bit Bennett's hand. But this time it was controlled. It was focused. I can destroy men like Bennett, she asked. I smiled. It was a savage, proud smile. You can do better than that, I said. You can save the women they try to break, and in the process you will destroy their power. Nia closed the envelope. She held it to her chest like a shield. She stood up. She looked taller. She looked like the mistress of the estate, not the maid. I want to start today, she said. I stood up beside her. Then let us go to the office, I said. We have work to do. We walked toward the house together. The sun was shining. The birds were singing. And for the first time in 10 years, the Thorne legacy was not just about buildings and bank accounts. It was about justice. And my daughter was holding the hammer. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Hyatt ballroom sparkled like captured stars, but they could not compete with the woman standing at the podium. It had been exactly 1 year since I dragged my daughter out of the hell that was our own home, and tonight she was not a victim, and she was not a maid. Nia stood before 500 of Atlanta's most powerful people wearing a dress the color of deep red wine that cost more than the car Bennett used to drive. She looked like a queen who had conquered a kingdom of ash and rebuilt it into a fortress of gold. I sat at the table nearest the stage, my hands resting on my cane, my heart swelling so large I thought it might burst. The room was silent, captivated by her voice. It was not the trembling whisper of the woman I found in the kitchen. It was a voice of steel and velvet, commanding attention and demanding respect. We raised $50 million tonight, Nia said, her gaze sweeping across the room. $50 million to ensure that no woman in this state ever has to wonder if she can afford to leave her abuser. $50 million to buy lawyers and safe houses and new lives. The applause was thunderous. People stood up. Senators and CEOs were on their feet, cheering for the woman who had spent a decade locked in a basement. I clapped until my hands stung, but I did not stand. I watched her face. I saw the way she smiled, not with vanity, but with the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. She had taken her trauma and forged it into a weapon to protect others. Later that night, as the gala wound down, Nia found me. She sat next to me, smelling of expensive perfume and triumph. She held a glass of sparkling water, her hand steady as a rock. "Did I do okay, Daddy?" she asked the little girl I raised, peeking through the powerful CEO facade. "You did not just do okay," I said. "You set the world on fire." She looked at the crowd. "I saw someone looking at me earlier," she said. "A man. He looked like Bennett. For a second, I felt that old panic. I felt like I needed to run and hide in the pantry." I took her hand. "Bennett is gone, Nia," I reminded her. "He is in a place where he can never hurt you again." "I know," she said, squeezing my hand. "But sometimes the ghost feels real. Ghosts cannot hurt you when you are the one holding the light," I said. "And tonight, you are the brightest thing in this city." She smiled, and for the first time in a year, the shadows were completely gone from her eyes. She was free, truly free. She was no longer defined by what had happened to her. She was defined by what she had done with it. The Phoenix Foundation was not just a charity, it was her victory lap. While Nia was drinking sparkling water in a ballroom, Bennett Sterling was drinking toilet water in a federal penitentiary. Justice in the real world is rarely poetic, but sometimes the universe aligns in a way that is terrifyingly perfect. Bennett had been sentenced to 25 years for fraud, embezzlement, and human trafficking charges that Alistair had made stick by proving he had held Nia against her will for profit. In prison, the hierarchy is brutal and simple. Bennett entered thinking he could use his charm and his business acumen to survive. He thought he could run scams from the inside. He was wrong. The other inmates smelled his weakness instantly. They knew what he was. They knew he was a man who beat women and starved his wife. In prison, that makes you the lowest form of life. Bennett was assigned to the sanitation detail in Block D. Every morning at 4 a.m., he was woken up by a guard banging a baton on his cell bars. He was handed a bucket, a rag, and a brush. It was the exact same routine he had forced Nia to endure for 10 years, but there was a twist. The guards, knowing exactly who he was and what he had done, assigned him the worst job in the prison. He was the toilet scrubber. I had received a report from a contact inside the prison just yesterday. He told me that Bennett spends 12 hours a day on his knees scrubbing the filth of 500 other men. His hands, once manicured and soft, are now cracked and bleeding from the harsh industrial chemicals. His knees are swollen. He has lost 30 pounds. The arrogance is gone, scrubbed away by the reality of his new life. One afternoon, my contact told me Bennett was cleaning the common room while the other inmates watched the news. A segment about the Phoenix Foundation Gala came on the television. Bennett looked up from his bucket. He saw Nia on the screen, radiant and powerful. He saw the headline about the $50 million. He dropped his brush. He stared at the screen, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the dirty water on the floor. He realized in that moment that she had not just survived him, she had surpassed him. He was on his knees in prison, scrubbing filth while the woman he called a useless maid was being celebrated as a hero. "Get back to work," Sterling, an inmate, shouted, kicking Bennett's bucket over. Bennett scrambled to clean up the mess, his hands shaking, just like Nia's used to. He was the maid now, he was the servant, and he would be for the rest of his life. Chloe fared no better. She avoided prison by turning state's witness against Bennett, but she lost everything else. I sued her for the value of the stolen jewelry and the money Bennett had spent on her. She was bankrupt within a week. Now she works double shifts at a truck stop diner off the interstate in Alabama. Her designer clothes are gone sold to pay legal fees. Her face, without the constant expensive treatments, has aged 10 years in one. She spends her days serving coffee to men who do not look at her and her nights sleeping in a trailer she shares with 3 other people. She wanted a life of luxury without working for it. Now she works harder than she ever imagined just to survive. Sunday morning arrived with a gentle breeze that smelled of rain and rich earth. I stood in the garden of the estate wearing my old work boots and a loose linen shirt. Nia was beside me wearing gardening gloves and a wide-brimmed hat. We were not servants. We were the masters of this earth. We had spent the morning digging a hole in the center of the yard right where Bennett had forced Nia to bury her dog years ago. But we were not burying death today. We were planting life. I held the root ball of a grandiflora rosebush. It was a rare variety called the black baccara, its petals a deep velvety red that looked almost black in the shadows. It was strong, resilient, and thorny. It could survive the harshest winters and come back blooming stronger than before. "Hold it steady, baby girl," I said, lowering the plant into the earth. Nia held the trunk, her hands strong and sure. She packed the soil around the roots, pressing it down firmly. We worked in silence, the rhythm of the work a shared language of healing. When we were done, we stood back and looked at it. It stood tall and proud against the backdrop of the White House. "It will grow here," Nia said, wiping dirt from her cheek. "The soil is good now." "Yes," I said. "We purged the poison." I looked at my daughter. She was standing in the sunlight, the master of her own destiny. I thought about the journey that had brought us here. I thought about the plane crash that took 10 years of my life. I thought about the basement. I thought about the moment I walked up to that gate as a beggar. "I learned a lot in the last 10 years, Nia," I said, leaning on my shovel. "I learned that money is not power. Money is just a tool. Power is the ability to endure. Power is the ability to stand up when the whole world wants to push you down." Nia nodded, looking at the rose. "And power is knowing who you are," she added. "Exactly," I said. I turned to look at the camera, breaking the fourth wall for the final time. To everyone watching this, I said, my voice low and serious. "I want you to remember one thing. You can steal a man's money, you can steal his house, you can even steal his years, but you can never steal his name. I am Langston Thorne, this is my daughter Nia, and we are still here. If you have people in your life who treat you like you are nothing, who make you feel small, who try to erase you, remember this story. Remember that the wheel always turns. Remember that justice is not something you ask for. It is something you take. Stand up, fight back, and never let them forget who you are." Nia smiled at me, a genuine bright smile that reached her eyes. "Ready for lunch, Daddy?" she asked. I smiled back. "I am starving," I said. And this time we are eating at the table. We walked back toward the house, leaving the dark red rose to grow in the garden, a silent sentinel watching over the home we had reclaimed. The nightmare was over. The long summer had finally begun. We often believe that enduring abuse in silence is a form of loyalty, or that protecting family means allowing them to destroy us bit by bit. But my journey taught me a brutal truth. True love never demands the sacrifice of your dignity. You are not defined by how people treat you when you are down on your knees. You are defined by the fire you ignite when you finally decide to stand up. No matter how deep the hole is or how long you have been in the dark, you have the power to write your own ending. Do not wait for a hero to save you. Look in the mirror and become the hero of your own life. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about people who stood up and fought back.